Welcome, welcome, welcome to the special edition of the Royalties Guaranteed this week. Looking forward to this one. Hello to Daryl, the co-host with the mostest. I think we're waiting on Lucas. How are you, Daryl?
Good, good. What a beautiful Sunday.
What a beautiful Sunday indeed. Yes, yeah. Welcome to the stage. Gene, how are you, Gene?
Doing quite well, thank you.
Good stuff, good stuff. Yes, first time coming to visit us, and yeah, very privileged to have you here. We've also got Preston up on the stage. Preston, Brian, how are you?
Yeah, good. How you doing?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good. Grant as well. You're up on the stage today. How are you, Grant?
Hey, everybody, doing great, thanks.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, well, we've got a house full already, so we'll just crack on with it. I want to just there's a few people that are sort of relatively new to the room. You know, we've certainly pushed this out and about today to try and promote it. So I just want to just go around the stage very, very quickly just to introduce people, just so that from a recording point of view that everybody knows who everybody is. So if we start with yourself, Gene, if you wouldn't mind just giving a very quick intro to yourself.
Sure, I'm Gene Hoffman. I'm CEO of Chia Network Inc. Been with the company since inception, kind of took over full-time a couple years ago. You know, Bram and I are old friends from back in the Cypherpunks days when I used to host the Cypherpunks meetings and was the second person ever to export PGP, quote-unquote, illegally. So not new to cryptocurrency because I almost started one in 1997.
Of course, yes, the one and only, the one and only. Preston, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick intro to yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a simple country lawyer. That's all there is to it.
A simple country boy. I'll accept that. I'll accept that. Most people know Daryl. Daryl, do you want to give yourself a little big up?
You know, Preston kind of took the wind out. Usually I like to say I'm the nobody with the cute little farm in Chia, but yeah, been around, know a thing or two.
Excellent, excellent. Grant, you're up. Give us a little intro.
Yeah, let's see, been working with crypto stuff since 2015. Currently the CEO of Evergreen Miner, at-home plug-and-play crypto device, enabling people to use Chia with limited amount of effort.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, thanks very much. Art, you've just jumped up on the stage as well. Always a pleasure to have you, buddy. You're always the hostess with the mostest. So how are you, Art?
I'm doing well, my friend. How are you, Monkey? How are you, Gene? How's everybody in the Chia community doing here on this beautiful Sunday?
All very good. All very good. Yeah, looking forward to this one. It's going to be a good one. I'll just give a little bit of an overview of the space and how we're going to run it and why it came across today, or why we've put this on today. So the reason we put this on today is Preston came into our space probably about 3 weeks ago now, and talked a little bit about decentralization and you know, its importance with sort of the legal side and how things are. You know, from a legal perspective, how that's being looked at from sort of the outside world. So I thought it'd be best to dive into this a little bit deeper, and who better with Gene himself as well, and obviously Grant and a few other people. Lucas is up here as well. So yeah, that's the reason it come about. And so the way we're going to run it today is there's sort of a few bits to go over. There's sort of the Chia Incorporated recent events, which I don't want to spend too much time on, but I think it's probably worth just touching on the recent bits and pieces that have been going on with Chia Inc. Then the sort of main body of the space as such will be, you know, around decentralization and you know, why it's important from different points of view. We'll take some questions from the floor and we'll just sort of go with the flow a little bit. I think that's probably the best way. And then towards the end of the space, we've got Futuradora is going to come up, and she's been working on something. She's been missing in action for a little while, so I'm looking forward to find out what she's been dealing with as well, and what she's been working on with a few other people in the community. So let me just get Lucas up here to co-host as well. And I guess I'll start things off, Gene, if you don't mind, just to dive in with some of the recent bits and pieces that have been going off with Chia Inc. themselves, the company, and just sort of touch on these bits, because I know a few people in the space will probably be wanting to hear more about a few things. So if you don't mind, I mean, can we talk about some of the recent bits and the recent layoffs with some of the team members?
Certainly. So I would say, really some delays are driving a lot of this. Plus, it is probably the worst nuclear crypto market we've seen in a long while, nuclear winter, that is. So, it's a hard thing to do. We had to let go of some really great people we'd absolutely bring back. But, if you do these things, you want to do them as deep as you can to make sure that you're creating really good long runway. We were able to do that while not really losing the core things we want to deliver on the roadmap. I would caution that the roadmap's probably going to move 20% to the right from a timing perspective. But, we have a real strong focus on delivering kind of the enterprise feature set that is going to enable our late stage opportunities in the sales pipeline to really adopt public blockchains for real business use cases, like the World Bank is already doing, like some typical Corporation of America are doing. So, this was very much making sure that we had the wherewithal and the runway to, survive, to continue to increase revenue and continue the IPO process in the background. We were able to secure a new underwriter, and everybody needs to understand the reason we lost an underwriter is because UBS decided to destroy the Credit Suisse fintech banking group. Those people are believers, and they've landed at other institutions, and those other institutions are likely to be involved. So, with that, the thing I think is more relevant to this conversation is around our decision that our view is we can actually sell Chia at this point, XCH. And there's a couple different reasons for that. One is we've always planned to, sooner or later, sell some XCH because we think it's the most tax-effective way to get the value to our shareholders over the long term. We prefer to have had the public filing done, but timing is what timing is, and the market is what the market is. The couple things going into when we filed in March, I think, first of all, true conventional wisdom back in March was that we were going to get a response to our S1 of lol, no, signed Gary. I think the second thing is, and Preston can comment on this later, I don't believe people were sure the SEC was going to follow the 2019 guidance still. And I can tell you from our feedback that they are taking the 2019 guidance quite seriously. And the key to the 2019 guidance is, are you sufficiently decentralized? And in our reviewing and justifying that we believe we do not control the Chia blockchain, it became really clear how little we actually control the Chia blockchain. If everybody's following along, we are not currently the dominant farmer software. And many of our pools ship exact clones with their tweaks and changes to our software. We obviously have no voting rights or anything like that on the blockchain, so a whole host of things go away. Bram and I have never really believed in on-chain governance for the chain. On-chain governance for your LLC is a different story. So with all those facts kind of enhanced and better understood from our interactions, the other thing is that, even though we think parts of the Ripple decision are wrong, both the Ripple decision and the Terra Luna decision violated one other kind of, curious SEC extreme position, which is this kind of a notion that tokens are inherently securities. In other words, that somehow the U.S. law would work in a way that if you did an ICO, then it was only a security and had to stay a security, and there's no way you could look at it differently. And by the way, that might still be true if you did an ICO before you build something. But even Judge Rakoff, who's very well respected on these issues, was skeptical of the "it's always a security" view. However, it's certainly true that you can sell a token as a security, just like you can sell an orange as a security in Howey. So, to the extent that we do sell any Chia, we're going to make sure that it would otherwise qualify for securities exemption. So it's kind of a belt and suspenders stance because we don't believe we have to, but we'd rather be safe and easy and compliant, and it's not that hard to add that compliance step. So, exciting times. We just hired a market maker and transferred some of the first coins out of the pre-farm. The nerd in me loved watching the custody tool work, and the version we're using internally is kind of, alpha, beta quality. It's certainly production quality from a security standpoint. But the vaulting that we're about to ship and the iOS signer and all those other things are going to make this so easy for just normal people to use. And it's just really exciting that people are going to be able to have this like low risk, easy to review, oops, I made a mistake, easy to fix. It was a very different experience than the first time we moved the pre-farm into the custody solution. So anyway, lots of exciting stuff, lots of moving parts, and I'm sure lots of questions. So.
Yeah, actually, great segue too, and it was awesome watching that pre-farm move, and even people in the Whisper chats. They've built the notification bots for anytime anything from the pre-farm moves. There's some tools out on GitHub, but that was cool to see. I did have a question on the pre-farm, and that was, would CNI consider selling off any of their BTC reserves before the pre-farm, or is that kind of separate accounting, considering selling off XCH reserves before tapping into the BTC?
No, we would liquidate BTC first, and also we don't have a tremendous amount of BTC. It was actually a bit of a controls problem because we were actually considering moving whatever BTC we had over a bridge to Chia, so we could use the Chia custody tools for our BTC. But it was just not worth really holding on to the nominal amount of BTC we had.
Got it. And then on the layoffs, was that tied at all to an external, influence? It came shortly after announcing the new underwriter. Was this all internal financing and controls that determined these, or was there some external influence that kind of helped see the light and needing to do a reduction in force?
Well, it was fundamentally the delay in our next filing because, from an investor standpoint, not knowing that you were able to move forward on that IPO filing really significantly increased the execution risk, if you will. And it's not a good environment out there at all. If you look around, the only crypto investors that are investing are doing it in Series A and seed, sometimes B, and that's it. And we're more like a C or D, even though technically a D is really more like a C.
Fantastic. Yes, Lucas, welcome to the stage as well. How are you, Lucas? Before we crack on,
I'm doing great. Hey, Gene. Hey, Grant. Hey, everyone. Brad. And I have questions that I could go with, or Monkey, if you do. Hey, Gene. I don't know if you want to hear it or what.
You go for it, Lucas. I'm here to sort of moderate today. I just want to make it all go smooth. But you fire away.
Well, and Preston, I haven't met you before, but I see that you're a lawyer and with George Mason. And Gene, you were with PGP whenever there was an argument. I guess my question is concerning the definition of money in the United States. And Gene, you were with PGP at a time whenever the movement towards or in the definition of money was upheld and then determined or released in sort of an argument that code is speech, and that the cryptography that secured this peer-to-peer networking was speech, and that was sort of a government attack on this understanding of money. And then we saw SOPA, which was a private or commercial attack too. And now in the case of Ripple. So I wondered, just while I had you guys on stage, if you could speak towards if you see any what sort of change that we're seeing now in the legal dialogue and the understanding of who controls money, or
yeah. Mind if I chime in on that one, Jim?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Preston. I'm a partner at Brown Rudnick, and so I gave a glib answer and said I was a simple country lawyer. My actual background, I was a big city lawyer in London, England. I then started the first enterprise blockchain startup in 2014. We deployed some of the first permission blockchain systems anywhere, right? R3, that big interbank consortium, used our tech. Swift used our tech. So I've been doing this for a long time, and now I'm a partner with a law firm, and yes, also an adjunct professor at the Scalia Law School at George Mason University. So I think the core of the question was, like, who gets to define money and what is the definition? I think for the purposes of American law, at least, money is a context-specific thing, right? So if you have a law that has to have some kind of awareness of what money is and how you classify property and whether that property is money. It's going to depend on the specific context that the law is being applied. So, for example, if you're talking about the tax code in the United States, Bitcoin is not money for the purposes of the tax code, right? It's not taxed like cash. So, whereas because cash is kind of the base unit of measurement. So, all other property is measured by reference to its dollar value, right? And that's how you apply it and measure your taxes, right? You say, well, I acquired property worth this amount of money on this date. I disposed it for this amount of money on this later date. You look at the difference between those two amounts, which doesn't account for inflation or anything else. And then you compute the amount of tax which is due on either the gain or which can be written off with respect to the loss. If you look at other situations, for example, you mentioned Ripple Labs. The question with that would be, is Bitcoin money or is crypto money for the purposes of the Securities Act, and specifically whether something is an investment of money in a common enterprise, right? Or, for example, if you're looking at the money transmitter statute, the question is Bitcoin money for the purposes of the money transmitter statute if, for example, you're under investigation for money laundering? The two cases for that, one of them was United States versus Shrem and Fayella, that's Charlie Shrem's, the BitInstant and Silk Road case from 2014. And that determined that Bitcoin is money for the purposes of the money transmitter statute. And so any other property is capable of also being money, which is on a crypto ledger. Then you have the securities one, and the question is there an investment of money? And that one was actually the case of Shavers. So it's SEC versus Trend and Shavers. And he was a Bitcoin Ponzi schemer using the name Pirate at 40 is how he's commonly for Bitcoin savings and trust. So I think the answer to that is all of this is money, depending on the context that it's in. But you have to look at the very specific legal context that you're looking at the property in. I would also draw a distinction between the money and then the thing that's creating it or the code that you're running. The code itself, right, or the program, that's expressive conduct. That's something which would be regarded as speech. So we would distinguish, for example, in Chia, the Chia client is something which is very different from the Chia token when held by you.
Yeah, I'd only add that, like in the United States, the First Amendment is both the sword and the shield here. And the only real debate in the courts about software being speech is whether or not compiled software isn't speech. In the Ninth Circuit, compiled software is definitely speech. There's no real difference. Just because some of y'all don't know how to read a compiled binary doesn't mean that we don't have people on our team who can absolutely read a compiled binary or assembly code and work with it. So, this is where kind of the rubber hits the road. Now, there's all sorts of subtle gradations here. And I think one of the thoughts was that this conversation today was going to be about this particular point, which is if things are truly peer-to-peer and you're on a website that exposes information about that, that's a pretty First Amendment activity. And in fact, there's this other thing, which is Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, which basically makes it so that no one except Congress can enforce liability on a website operator. And so, when you see these executive branch agencies in the United States trying to say that they can force websites to come into their regulatory regime, they don't have an exemption from the CDA. And so it's also a little kind of interesting side note about all this. But it basically boils down to, if you're speaking non-fraudulent, even commercial speech, then the government has a very high burden to carry to be able to restrict that speech.
Well, now, I think the difference being on that is there's also a difference between speech and conduct, right? So that's something where a lot of people have gotten confused, in particular in the DeFi space. And I know we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves because that's the topic for after the Chia Network Inc. discussion. But that's what we'll talk about in about 10 minutes, is the difference between speech and conduct and what that looks like.
Yeah, and agreed. So, for everybody in the room, the Tornado Cash guy's conduct doesn't look real good. And so the speech elements may be kind of destroyed by the actual conduct in the background.
Well, and I didn't mean to jump the gun, Gene, but I also I wanted to maybe set the stage for some of the history there, because when you say do not control the Chia blockchain, it just seems, when I first looked at Chia, I thought it seemed that not only was the technology brilliant, and the smart coin, so sort of as there were many things that I loved, but also the separation that CNI kept from the community, from the promotion, etc., And also, even with the pre-farm, it seemed to me to be a hedge against capture by the dollar specifically, or anything else. And so I thought that was well done. And I wondered if you would speak to maybe some of the planning or the expectation to that, if you would.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, so there's another element of securities law that's important, and it's not obvious, and Preston knows this cold. Securities law is at the transaction, and it analyzes each transaction. And so that reality meant that there was some certainty to some extent about what the future would hold when we were looking forward in 2017. And the things we knew were that one of Bitcoin's problematic issues is that there's no real good incentive for developers other than begware. And we felt like that was a bad idea. We wanted to make sure that, you were able to ultimately build the equivalent of the Linux Foundation, but you wanted to do that at the end and not at the beginning. All these other projects built these billion-dollar foundations, and it's like, okay, great, all the developers all drive off in Lambos and you get no software. Well done. We also knew we couldn't predict what the world would look like. I mean, in 2017 or 18, if you told me that the FIT bill, which is the kind of sufficiently decentralized and give it CFTC spot market regulatory authority, would be something seriously capable of passing the United States Congress, I would have laughed at you. So, Bram and I wanted to have some optionality so that we knew that we could fundamentally deliver ongoing development of a core feature set so that it'd be able to, get across things like quantum cryptography potentially, scaling. There's these issues out there that no one's really solved yet. We think that having Turing complete smart contracts with payment channels is the thing that actually breaks through versus what we've kind of seen with Lightning's kind of okay and rollups are only kind of okay, but they're all very centralized. And this is the thing, got to be decentralized. And look, the other thing that really drove Bram and our thinking is, you want to decentralize up front. You want to make sure that you don't have the mining pooling problem. You want to make sure that you've got hundreds of thousands of nodes. And I think we really successfully did that, maybe beyond our wildest expectations. And that really matters when you're talking to regulators or customers and they're thinking about this as kind of grown-ups with other people's money. I had a bank CIO literally say to my face, like, Vitalik will never censor bank transactions. And, he was like saying that about proof of stake. When we sit there talking about to like other national governments, hey, there's 1,700 farmers in your nation already. That's more validators than most like major blockchains have validators, and that's just like some Latin American country. So, it was really very much making sure that we had the tools. And part of the public company strategy is that a public company is one of the best high governance methods to be able to fairly distribute that pre-farm over the long haul. And, we want to and are working very hard to make it so that everybody around the world can own equity, have your piece of the pre-farm, and slowly but surely from shareholder value, either dividends or repurchases of other equity to cut down, your total dilution number, which is what most Fortune 500 companies do. That, to me, there was no better way to build trust, to build transparency, and to be able to, in a way that made sense, slowly but surely, make it so that CNI does not have a majority of coins at all. And in fact, long term, the goals of Chia Network Inc. is to have increased shareholder value enough that at the end of the day, we create that, Chia Development Foundation, fully funded with a mix of Chia and fiat and whatever else investments, and finally distribute the Chia Network business value out to the shareholders, probably after having already spun out like the enterprise software business.
Yeah, something you touched on that I was going to ask about, but you already alluded, is like obviously CNI is like an eventual for-profit company to drive adoption of the blockchain, but it sounds like eventually you'd like to have more of, a foundation route where all the development and influence comes from the community, and the CNI as a company just helps fund that community development and keep things thriving after we get past that kind of mass adoption and more people building on top of Chia. Is that how you kind of point it?
Yeah, look, I mean, in 10 years, you're going to have like teams at top 5 US banks who are the Chialisp experts, and 2 or 3 of them are contributing to the master repo because, they're out there doing new bank applications and go, hey, I need this additional functionality. So, just like Linux, you got, teams at every major peripheral company, every major, software business that are the teams responsible for their part of, developing Linux. And, there's definitely a real attempt to, take all the data out of Bram's head and slowly move it into a bunch of domain experts like Arvid and Art and others so that they can start to own those entire pieces and know that, they don't have to worry about their paycheck. They don't have to worry about their health benefits. And they can just focus on continuing to advance the state of the art of what the Chia blockchain can do.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it is one of these super important things, and I think that does sort of lead us on to the sort of bigger picture of decentralization and why it's important, and not only from the sort of security side of things, but also the legal side, and I guess touching on the security side of decentralization to start with. Chia being, currently the most decentralized blockchain, on the planet. Was that something that was expected straight away, or did you think it would be more of a battle to get to this point?
I think the only thing I can say about that launch is that Bram and I never expected to be in a situation where the mass amount of net space coming on was coming so fast that we're only about 14 days before that exponential growth curve, we would eat all storage in the universe. So I think it went above our expectations. I certainly did not expect that we hit like 400,000 or 500,000 nodes, which we did. It's way beyond our expectations. And, fundamentally, it says something. I mean, look, we're the most decentralized blockchain by node count. We're the most decentralized blockchain by Nakamoto coefficient. The number 2 is Bitcoin at 48,000 nodes and a Nakamoto coefficient of 2.
Yeah, and it does. Looking at when you sort of see the graphics for this, it's pretty incredible. The Nakamoto consensus is just off the scale compared to Bitcoin, which is essentially looked at as probably the most decentralized blockchain there is. It is incredible. Art, you've got your hands up. How are you, buddy? What do you want to say?
I'm doing excellent. Hey, Gene, I just want to say my condolences for, I know as a company owner, having to lay off employees is some of the hardest things. So I hope you and the team are taking some time for yourselves to be able to balance that and get back on track. I just want to let you know that, us, the community, believe in your leadership 100%, and we're here to back you no matter what. So it might be a little bit of a tragic couple of weeks, but we're here to help you. And my question is, what can we as a community do where CNI is kind of taking a step back from, where we could kind of fill the shoes and fill the need in the demographic, you think?
So 2 things. One thing, just I want everybody to know, interestingly, I didn't think about this, there were actually 2 other people who stayed through the layoff who actually helped me do a layoff on a previous company that worked out very well. Unfortunately, this is just one of the things you kind of have to do sometimes. And it's really about the macroeconomic environment. People are freaking out about being in the late 90s where having a 7% interest rate on your home mortgage was kind of normal, actually. But anyway, as to what you guys can do to help, things we can't put as much emphasis on. Fish is going part-time, but still fully dedicated. So the extent folks can help with, evangelizing the game companies and showing how to build games around NFTs, he's a core point of contact to go to, his supporting him would be quite valuable. It's a longer run play, and that's partially why we couldn't keep investing directly right this second. But I don't believe it changes the fact that long run, we're going to be one of the best blockchains for that side of gaming. When Bram gets his state channel peer-to-peer gaming stuff ready, there's definitely going to be a bunch of pieces in the community to do for that, find other players, those kinds of things. So, obviously we want the community to be very involved there. We're about to roll out the ETH bridge, and that's going to be an important place for pieces of the community because I think being able to get, USDC and USDT and ETH direct across that bridge is going to really make the trading pairs at, BetSwap and Dexy that much more interesting and fun. Other places, we can't invest as heavily in farming. We are excited that, we're working with the no SSD guys. We're excited with what Max is doing. We're excited for Max to get higher compression levels out. Do want to say that everybody who thinks that you can compress all the way to zero, they're wrong. Both Max and no SSD are like, yeah, this is probably it. And Bram has some ideas how to maybe even make that go away longer term, but there's no real panic about that. It is counterintuitive that it turns out that farming en masse is actually more efficient with a little bit of GPU in there. So, I mean, those are the areas where the community can really work. And look, when I say certain things, the rest of the world is like bag holder CEO. Yeah, okay, fine. When you guys say that and you point to the resources that like Slowest Time Lord has created, the stuff we make available, and you show people how they can audit it if they don't believe that node count number, grab a VM, run it for 2 days, and you'll have the node count number. So it's really about your voices being heard by others in other projects and communities that even in this hellscape, we're doing cool stuff, and we're the World Bank's blockchain.
Thank you, Gene. I appreciate it. And like I said, if there's anything that pops up in the next couple of months, please feel free to lean on us.
We will.
Cool. I think that sort of brings us into the sort of main body of the talk then about the decentralization then. And I guess what Preston was talking about in the space a few weeks ago, more of the sort of the legal side of things and the way that sort of the SEC and authorities are looking at these centralized entities that are maybe being built, or the way that maybe Ethereum and sort of other blockchains operate around this sort of almost centralized space. I don't know if Preston or yourself, Gene, wants to talk about that a little bit.
I want to throw out one thing and I want to hand it to Preston. There is a fundamental architecture difference between Chia and Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ethereum has centralized monolithic smart contracts. It's like you're running an application. This is a bad idea. The reason it's bad is for two core reasons. Reason number one is that when you use an Ethereum smart contract, have to trust that the developer is both competent, which, by the way, making the language super easy to use attracts not necessarily competent developers, and not nefarious, that he or she has really actually given up control, doesn't have a multi-sig hiding behind it, doesn't have a backdoor that they've just waited for. But the problem is, secondarily, you have to know that the North Koreans spend all day, every day trying to find a backdoor, either that's intentionally there or not intentionally there, to drain the funds from that contract. So when you're doing something peer-to-peer on Ethereum, you're doing peer to monolithic centralized smart contract to peer. In Chia, when you're doing an offer file, you are using communications channels to invite someone else to do business with you. That's it. There's no developer. The development is in many ways done. It is, audited in the sense of cats. It is, it's these narrow, very specifically understood primitives like cats, like offer files, like NFTs, that transact peer-to-peer trustlessly, and that you have good control of and custody of when you're out like providing liquidity or making a market. It's just a very different paradigm.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in here, and I'm going to jump into something a little goofy. So depending on which audience I'm talking to, I refer to this as the nuclear bomb test or the space marmot test. And given that this is a Chia room, we're going to call it the space marmot test. And so let's say you and your developer team, right, decide, you're running a startup, you're on Ethereum, whatever. Let's say you're Uniswap, right? And you decide, Uniswap people say, you know what, fuck it, let's go on vacation. And not only are we going to go on vacation, we're going to bring everything with us. All our servers, all our devs, all our office equipment, the whole thing. The whole office, we're going to just go set up shop in Yosemite, and we're going to go camping for 2 weeks, the whole dev team, right? So they go out there, they do that, all their stuff is there. Suddenly, right, keeping in mind this is called the space marmot test, the battle fleet of the Marmot Star Empire decides it's finally time to take out the planet Earth. And so they drop out of warp in low orbit, thousands of ships, right? Total mass panic, widespread panic. It's just a complete total disaster for the human species. One by one, the governments of the world surrender to this Marmot invasion. But before that happens, they identify your startup as the linchpin to humanity's planetary defenses. And so what they do is as they're passing over your campsite in Yosemite, they charge up They're fuzzy, adorable Marmot ion cannon, and they vaporize you, right? And your startup, right? It's all gone. So if after that happens, right, if after the space marmots vaporize you, the application still works, it's decentralized. If it doesn't still work, we ask ourselves, okay, why doesn't it still work? And then does that present, right, from an analytical perspective, we're obviously not really worried about space marmots, right? Because space marmots are our friends and they want us to prosper. So they're not going to wipe out the human species. What we are worried about are regulators, right? Because regulators don't like us and they don't want us to prosper. So if you can be taken out by the Marmot ion beam, right, from orbit, and then your application will stop working, as would be the case with Uniswap, right, including with their new KYC primitives, right? If there's no one to check whether the KYC is valid, that new application is going to stop working. So the question is, does it still work? In the case of Chia, for example, by contrast, you look at cats and you look at all of the functionality that's in every single user wallet, and you can say, actually, you know what? You could vaporize a single company, right, that has a cat that's issued Marmot coin or something like that. And if that were to happen, what would happen is, if that were to happen and the company were vaporized, the chain wouldn't give a shit. You would have to take out, just like with Bitcoin, you would have to take out every single node, right, or all but two nodes, essentially, to shut down the system. So because the protocol has been designed in such a way that it forms some very basic but very firm opinions about the types of transactions that blockchain users want to engage in, you don't have this over-reliance on outside infrastructure, whether that be whether that be a user interface, whether that's an oracle, right, a price oracle, which is telling you what to do. And so as a result, we can fully disaggregate the ecosystem into two types of software, right, or two types of products. Whereas with Ethereum, you can't. So with Ethereum, if you want to run a DEX, what you have to do is you have to have the software, the client, a user interface that shows you the order book. And then unless you're going to be interacting with Ethereum through the command line, you've got to go through that user interface, generally speaking, hosted by a third party, in order to actually get your command out to the network. Legally, especially in the United States, that's a really big problem, right? It's probably also a problem in other places for a variety of different reasons. But in the US, it's potentially a criminal problem from a money transmitter point of view, and it's potentially a civil problem from either the SEC's point of view, if you're trading something the SEC thinks is security, or from the CFTC's point of view, if you're trading something which is leveraged or a derivative, right? And so what happened about a month and a half, is that three big providers of this type of tech in the Ethereum ecosystem, Open, Deridex, and one other, the name currently escapes me, ZeroX, excuse me, all got dinged by the CFTC, who said, okay, guess what? You can't do this anymore. So they all settled with the CFTC, and they're shutting down their U.S. operations, and who knows what else they'll be doing in the near future. But essentially, that model is no longer sustainable. What Chia does and has done, and I know they've been planning for this for a long time, because I've known Gene and Bram and people who preceded them actually, and so Ryan Singer, for example, for years. They've been thinking about this kind of stuff way ahead of time. And if you can have the user control everything, right, about the application, right? Everything's running on their computer locally. They're just running a node on the blockchain, but they can just run apps on their own machines, and then they can have information centers, right, information providers that play no role in contract execution. So your typical blockchain explorer sitting there indexing the data separately. That's something which is a compliant solution, right? You don't have a third party in that who's actually carrying out these financial transactions. So that's what we're seeing now, is that other projects, particularly in Ethereum, but also in Urbit, also in Bitcoin, are starting to say, okay, well, but really in Ethereum, people are trying to pivot, but what they're doing is they're running into a brick wall, and they're saying it's impossible, right, to do. I'm a member of a crypto lawyer group, and most of the crypto lawyers there are affiliated with Ethereum or EVM related projects. If you talk to them about this, they say it's impossible to do that. And you say, well, Chia did it. They say, well, you're just in the tank for Chia because they made Marmot coin and you like Marmots. They say, no, like I get it, but like it's not Chia specifically. Like this is a very deliberate design choice on their part that anyone could copy. But if Ethereum were to copy it, you'd wind up having breaking changes to the protocol, right? So essentially the whole universe is figuring out hosted UIs are a problem. And as soon as they figure that out, they run into a second problem, which is, okay, if we're getting rid of the hosted UIs, like our application breaks because Ethereum won't let us build something, and we can't run a node, right, an Ethereum node because it's too unwieldy, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we're going. We're in the middle of this shift or in the middle. We're at the very beginning of a shift in terms of design philosophies, which is a direct response to U.S. regulatory intervention. Chia is ahead of the curve. Most of the rest of crypto is behind it.
Yeah, and I just add one technical note. One of the key things that Chia has is a light wallet protocol, so you don't necessarily have to run a node per se to be able to be fully decentralized. You can basically, you may not know this, but what's going on in the background with your Chia wallet is it's actually going out to the 100,000 nodes and querying them and doing some proofs to make sure that the results they're getting are right, so that even the barrier to entry of I need to run a node is not necessarily there. Now, I know our light wallet has not been as excellent as we would like, and that's one of the things we want to fix. But point being, that's a key piece of the critical infrastructure to remain decentralized.
Yeah, and on the technical side, Gene, it was just a few days ago, I think just before the hash green announcement, you kind of talked how expiring offer files will really help power a more decentralized AMM. Wondering if you could speak to kind of how AMMs could be powered by expiring offer files and what makes AMMs on Chia different than, the centralized Uniswap and those.
Well, look, to be clear too, there's two types of AMMs on Chia. There's what Yak's doing, which is very Uniswap-like, but it's still more decentralized because anybody can grab Yak's code and add a new pair, and he can't stop you, and you can't stop him. The neat thing about offer files with expiry is that you can do things like expire it in 2 or 3 blocks. And so you start getting in a situation where you can post a market, and the way you're posting a market is to bulletin boards. It's not that those interfaces are required. Obviously, you like to talk to people. But the neat thing about offer files is you can put them on Offerpoolio, Dexy.Space, SpaceScan, anywhere that takes them simultaneously. So fundamentally, the liquidity, even though it's fully decentralized, is actually centralized because it's actually being backed by the blockchain's ability to settle it. So what's really powerful about that is that you can do kind of order book creation virtually peer-to-peer. You can have high-frequency Web 2 style speeds that settle directly and enforced by the Chia blockchain every minute.
Preston, going back to something you mentioned in what you just said a couple minutes ago, does that mean that anyone that's running an Oracle or doing a fundamental redemption operation is therefore part of a common enterprise?
It depends. I mean, it depends on what statute you're looking at, whether that's a relevant fact. So if, for example, you were running part of something which was a mixer, right, a trustless mixer, for example, I don't know, something that rhymes with Blornado trash. Let's say you're running something like that. If you're running Tornado Cash or or an Oracle that was feeding into Tornado Cash, and you were doing so intentionally and deliberately, I would look at that and say, okay, maybe there's aider and abetter liability there from a criminal perspective. So that's an issue. If you were doing something which is providing transaction execution services or facilitating transaction execution for leverage trading, for example, and your Oracle was doing that, and again, you were doing it knowingly, intentionally to facilitate those activities, you've probably got some violations of the Exchange Act, or the Commodity Exchange Act, excuse me. And if you were doing it to facilitate securities exchange, you probably have some violations of the Securities Exchange Act. What doesn't violate all of these rules is the mere publication of information without coordination with illegal actors, right? If you're just saying, listen, I've got a bulletin board, I've got a blockchain explorer, it tells you it's got an open API, and here you go, and that'll tell you everything you need to know about the chain. But I'm not going to form too many opinions about what's on the chain, just access it as you will. That's something which, generally speaking, isn't a problem. What happens is people there's a temptation to overbuild, right? In any application in crypto, I see it happen all the time. Someone starts with a basic idea for a tool, and then says, shit, I need to monetize it. I need to turn this into a business. How do I do that? Well, I'll set up a UI, and I'll start extracting a fee, and I'll start managing it, and I'll have this key that I can use to update the code, and da-da-da-da-da. And they build themselves into a position where they're regulated. So it really depends on what exactly the application is, what information is being provided, how that information is finding its way into the application, and the level of intention, right, or coordination in some cases between the provider of the information and the developer of the app. I think what we'll probably wind up seeing, just for everybody's sort of self-protection, is a division of labor, right, especially in the Chia space. You're going to have people who focus purely on the publication of open source code, and you're going to have folks who focus purely on the publication of information. They will not coordinate. They will not talk to one another. They will not overlap. They will not engage in each other's lines of work, because the minute you blend those two things, right, you suddenly don't have in both of those things on their own, right, each is expressive conduct, which is protected by the First Amendment. If you combine them and you start hosting a website which facilitates the use of an open source tool which you made, which allows people to do leverage trading, right, then you've got something where potentially you're violating some rules.
So it sounds like one of the things that's going to need to happen for the continued decentralized operation of things like, say, what Circuit DAO is approaching, there needs to be some mechanism for a decentralized Oracle where it's not Circuit DAO that's doing their own Oracle. Otherwise, anyone who sort of engages in stablecoin type activities is probably going to be just regulated, pure and simple. But anybody who even kind of looks like that is going to be in a tough spot.
So you'd need an Oracle for a stablecoin if the Oracle were either you're an algorithmic stablecoin like Luna or Basecoin, which should be avoided at all costs because it doesn't work, period. It's economically impossible. Or you're a collateralized stablecoin like Maker, right? And even then, Maker probably doesn't work either, right? My suspicion about Maker is that it's actually just a giant hall of mirrors. It's a big fraud. There are people who are behind it, who hold large quantities of money, who have an interest in propping it up, A. And B, notice most of the Maker pool at this point is just USDC, right? So it's wound up becoming just a giant substitute for the USDC collateral, which is held in reverse, which means that if you go back to the source point of what gives this thing its value, it's that you have US dollar value collateral, right, which is convertible at par into US dollars in the form of USDC. So what I would say is I think oracles serve the function of providing reliable information to the blockchain, right, about particular states of the world. So if you're running, oracles don't necessarily have to be involved in the project, right? You could have an oracle which is a particular entry on a Bloomberg terminal, right? You could have an oracle which is a weather detector on top of your garage. It's just something which publishes information, and then you've got a computer which has some credential, which then says, listen, I'm signing this and I'm telling you this is the information I received. And so contract, you need to respond accordingly. I don't think this changes a lot of that for oracles that are external. I think what you'll wind up having is some computers somewhere will say, listen, we're signing this information. We're saying it's true. You might not know who it is. It doesn't change the essential fact that someone somewhere is going to be providing the data feed. And that's not a very decentralized thing to do, right? You introduce a lot of vulnerability if your entire decentralized system is reliant on someone's data feed being correct.
Yeah, and I just want to add that the way Bram and I think about how this works on Chia is that as an oracle, you can publish something reliably, and you can actually charge for it by basically saying, "Hey, I won't aggregate this unless this other address gets a small piece of the transaction." So you can actually charge for that. The idea then is you don't have one oracle; you have a host of oracles, and as the buyers and sellers in an offer-driven market, you basically say things like, "Hey, I want the median of these three oracles." And that's how you get to a decentralized world where you're also still potentially paying the oracle for being able to publish that information.
But it's also how you get LIBOR manipulation. So every single one of these systems, right? It works, but then I would invite you to change your assumptions, right? So it's like, well, okay, we've got, instead of one oracle, we've now got 50 data feeds, right, which are providing it. Okay, well, let's say you've got 50 data feeds, and let's say it's all people who went to school together or know each other, and they decide they're going to collude to change the outcome of contracts which are denominated in the underlying, which is controlled by those the median thing of oracles. That was the London interbank offer rate scandal. So.
Yeah, I can concur, Preston, but we haven't had a world where you could so easily pull multiple oracles and pay for them natively, right?
Oh yeah, I agree. I'm just saying, for arguendo here.
Certainly.
I would I would jump in and just say Michael Taylor's just jumped up on the stage. Who's been working very greatly in the data layer part of this the Chia blockchain. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing great. So I've been listening carefully, and there's a couple of things I was hoping to get clarification on, and how this all relates to data layer. So I've heard it mentioned a couple of times, like, hey, like once you start doing things like, like hosting, a UI that allows you to access, the application, that you can start to find yourself in legal hot water, potentially, if you're doing things the wrong way. And what I'm kind of curious about is, like, if you look at data layer, like, at the end of the day, data layer is just a traditional web host that you put up that allows you to allows other data layers to pull information to become mirrors and so on. And also, there's ways to mount like a Web 2 gateway, where you can basically create a gateway online. I mean, on a website to access applications from the data layer. And what I'm wondering is, if you're a data layer host or data layer mirror, can that kind of get you in trouble? If you,
It really depends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. If you're running, remember, there's a whole universe of stuff you can do that isn't regulated, at least in the United States. And if you are based in the United States, is virtually impossible to regulate from overseas. So, one thing we're seeing recently in social media, for example, if you've been following the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, of which I will offer zero opinion in this room, but one thing that has happened is that Thierry Breton, who's the European, he's one of the European commissioners responsible for the internal market, and he has been sending takedown letters and demand letters to every single social media company saying, you're hosting illegal content, take this down. You're hosting illegal content. He sent it to TikTok, he sent it to X, he sent it to Facebook. The information which is being removed in those cases is information regarding terrorist activity, regardless of, which point of view you're adopting, the attack information being taken down. Now, people who are pro-Israel are complaining that the information being taken down is suppressing terrorist, how to put it? It's suppressing the evidence of terrorist attacks, which they need to build support for their cause. Palestinians are complaining that it's taking down pro-terrorist content. I'm not sure what the EU's motivations are. I can't speak to it. I don't know. What I do know is all of the companies that are receiving these demands, the fines under the Digital Services Act are enormous, and so they're all complying, right? However, if they were based in the United States and not in Europe, they could ignore this, because no American court will ever enforce a European speech fine. So, because in the US, we've got this very different attitude towards publications. So if you wanted to take, for example, you want to build an app store on the Chia data layer that was distributing applications out, which did all of these crazy things, regardless of what the United States had to say about it or foreign governments had to say about it, virtually nothing could be done to stop you. You could say, listen, we're listing all these trading apps. We're not running them, right? The developers are listing them. We're sitting here in the data layer. We're providing them. And we don't have any opinions about it. We didn't, we didn't have anything to do with it. And what we're doing is we're just saying, listen, we're indexing stuff that people are putting up. The things that are restricted, the things that are controlled, are very specifically set out in the relevant statutes that have been violated, right? So in the case of the CFTC stuff, what you're looking at is soliciting, executing, right, or facilitating the execution of transactions, right? That's the definition of the thing that the CFTC is enforcing against with companies like 0x and Deridex. When you're talking about the Securities Exchange Act, you're looking at people who are setting up and establishing venues, right, where buyers and sellers of securities can come together to trade. So if you're running the App Store for that, right, you're not running the venue, right? So, and also there's Section 230 and there's civil liability. We can discuss that in a minute. But if you're actually hosting the venue, right, which does that, and your whole business is around that, you're going to have a much harder time making that argument. So what we will wind up seeing is that, for people who are providing decentralized applications, decentralized UIs, decentralized data layers, right, the provision of the data layer really isn't something that you should expect to have a huge amount of problem with the US regulators. Where you're getting in trouble is if you do these specific things, which, no longer constitute speech. And like even then, if you chose to either release source code or compiled binaries, right, in the Ninth Circuit, you would be totally within your rights to do so, as long as you did not engage in the prohibited activity, which is executing trades, bringing together buyers and sellers on a marketplace, which hosting a UI functionally does. So there's a whole universe of stuff that's outside that, of data provision and internet service provision that is going to be a very wide open field for people to explore in Web3 and DeFi. So don't think that like the US rules are going to prevent that aspect of the decentralized internet from flourishing. The only obstacle really to that is the user experience, which so far has been piss poor, and that's across the industry, right? So that's what I would say.
The one thing I'd add is the one item you do have to be careful about with data layer is child sex abuse material. So, it's a very different analysis when people put bad kitty porn on the blockchain versus on the data layer. So, whenever you're doing it, make sure.
That kind of like so there's three ways that I've worked with consuming data layer. First one is just peer to peer. You subscribe to another data layer. If there's an app that's mounted onto that singleton, you can run it on your own machine. I feel like that's relatively safe in terms of, is that going to run afoul of anything? The second option is where you have your own domain. And instead of just running a traditional database in the back end, you're running a data layer, and the domain's just serving the content to the website from your own data layer instance. I feel like that's kind of like, I don't see a difference between if you're just running your own front end through traditional means in that form, and I think that's probably, especially if you're running, some of these apps that you had mentioned that had run afoul, that could cause issues. But the third way is providing a gateway to a registry of data layers. So like one of the things I've been looking at is, like let's say you have a domain datalayer.link, and you allow anybody to register with your service, and what the service does is when you request data from the data layer, it'll iterate through the registry until it finds a data layer instance that has it and serve it. That's where I'm kind of curious. Like, you can't really, it's hard to monitor that kind of thing. You're just building a gateway and saying, have at it. Like, it's completely free and open. But now, like, I guarantee you the first thing that's going to be served through there is exactly what Gene just mentioned, is like,
well, you can if you can find a way to blacklist, Library had this problem. So Library was a blockchain and that had data, that had pointers to off-chain data, and if they received notice that one of those pointers related to something that they weren't, they shouldn't be hosting or connecting or linking to, they would simply censor their own links. So they would see, so you can't, in that instance, they couldn't actually censor the blockchain, but they could censor what they told third parties about it. So that's what they did. So, you'll have to, you'll obviously very serious issues. These kinds of questions are going to depend very heavily on the fact matrix around the specifics of the application being served. But, generally speaking, I think whenever you talk to anyone who talks about censorship resistance, right, you're almost never talking about censorship resistance against yourself. You're talking about censorship resistance against third parties, right, who want to prevent you from communicating things to other people. So if you're working on things on the data layer, what I would say is that if you're designing stuff where people who are hosting the applications won't be able to engage in their own content moderation on their own instance, right, that's something which is going to be pretty unpopular. Generally speaking, people want to control their data, right? They want to be able to censor how their infrastructure is being used. And then once you propagate something out to the wider universe, you want to make sure that third parties can't censor you, but you still need to have control and censorship over your own infrastructure. I think that's pretty universal.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think what you're working on, Michael, is is incredible, and I think it's got the potential to change a lot of things. To the extreme of it's going to potentially change how the internet operates, which is pretty mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, that's my goal.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah, it is crazy. It is crazy, and I guess that is the power of what's being created here. I was going to sort of move it on slightly then. So from sort of the legal side then, say for Ethereum, for instance, the obviously the chain is a proof of stake chain, and some would argue that that's becoming more and more centralized. Is that ever going to be an issue, do you think, from a sort of legal standpoint, with sort of staking pools, those sorts of things like that? And I guess the people that are building now on top of Ethereum are sort of heavily relying on these centralized entities that sort of bolt onto the side of Ethereum, sort of the Web 2.1 type things. Is there going to be a point where it sort of comes crashing down, or is it just going to be a slow move over to a more decentralized way of doing things, do you think? I guess that's to Gene and Preston, but Gene.
Well, look, one of our core thesis statements is that there's a whole bunch of really large institutions and governments that should be using blockchains already. I think as that tidal wave builds, you're going to see a pretty stark contrast between the blockchain that works and is used by people that everybody's heard of, instead of what sushi master is this again this week? Proof of stake is just a centralizing beast, and it's always been that way. Proof of work is a set of technologies that was created to fix the problems of proof of stake.
The issue Ethereum has, if they were going to have an issue with the centralization, it would have been when Joe Lubin controlled like 80% of the supply personally, which was years ago. So I don't think the government is going to do anything in particular to stop Ethereum because of the proof of stake architecture it uses. The question is Ethereum a trash fire, and is there something better which can supplant it? I think the question to A is yes, and the question to B is maybe. But that's all TBD.
I guess that sort of talks about the I think you touched on this when we talked before about the size of sort of crypto projects, and I guess their monetary value, their sort of total values becoming more of an issue, and more of an an authoritative eye being looked at these sorts of things as they grow and as they get bigger. But yeah, would you like to touch on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, so Chia, I think, what's the current market cap? Like 250 million. That's nothing. I mean, that is absolutely nothing. That is that is a tenth of a parking garage securitization I worked on in England in 2008. So like, it is absolutely it is such a tiny number, which gives you really some indication of how bearish the cryptocurrency markets are. Even what we're talking about are rounding errors, right? And those are the sizes of entire ecosystems innovating new technologies, which we know when the next bull comes around, people are going to pile into by their millions or tens of millions. So I think that crypto is really, we are very lucky that we live in a time when people are talking about the fact that crypto's dead. Congratulations, you live in one of those eras when everyone's acting like an idiot and they don't see what's happening and the growth that's happening behind the scenes because they're focusing on other things. So I think that the ecosystem is very, very small. That's correct. Chia's ecosystem is particularly small. You're talking about the Chia market cap is currently the endowment, about the same size of the endowment of my high school. So that should give you some indication of just how small it is compared to what it could be when the next crypto bull comes around. I'm hugely optimistic. And this is across the board, right, for all kinds of different crypto projects. Now, when that day comes, we can expect there's going to be a lot more regulatory scrutiny around the projects, which now are just doing nothing, right? They're too small, they're too below the radar, the volumes are too low to even be noticed. What you should do now, if you're building, is you should plan for that future, right? When all of a sudden you've become so big that you do get noticed, right? And then you are the next Uniswap. But then what happens is you've got the SEC knocking on your door, just like Uniswap did. So prepare now for that later eventuality, and you'll be very well off.
One way I like to put this is that all these projects have an attack surface from regulators and Karens and, the Luddites. The more you can keep your attack surface down, giving no regulator, no third party, no political aim, real leverage against the project, the more likely you are to make it through the crazy ups and downs that is BUIDL and HODL.
Yeah, go on, Lucas.
If I might. Gene, you earlier said that the SEC intervenes at the transaction. And yet it seems to me that Chia is bringing technology that is decentralizing that transaction and also automating it at the same time. So to Gene and Preston, like in a world when the SEC says no and that automation moves out of their jurisdiction, is this something like that a group of crypto lawyers is thinking about?
I mean, yes, the point is to take trusted middlemen out. Now, there's a push by regulators to try to reinsert middlemen that don't need to be there, but that's going to run up against the Fourth Amendment, and they have no idea about that part of it. Preston?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is that the idea behind decentralizing things so that the regulators can't touch it. Remember, the law is fluid, so it can always change, right? That's one of the fun things about it, is that it's kind of a moving target. And just when you think you're compliant, they can rug you, which just happened sort of in England, although it wasn't as bad as most people think it is, but it is quite bad. What I would say is that getting Congress to do anything and actually change a law is so difficult in the current political environment that I think the likelihood is that the United States will cease to exist before they make substantial and material amendments to the Securities Act. I think it is more likely that the United States collapses than that they will pass a meaningful bill which will actually regularize crypto in the United States. So with that as our background, I'll be pleasantly surprised if I'm wrong. But I just don't see it happening anytime soon, particularly because crypto got right coded and the Democrats just won't vote for it, with some notable exceptions like Richie Torres. So unless something really changes in Washington, we're not going to get new laws for a long time. Yes, of course, the regulators could say, well, now peer-to-peer transactions are illegal. Congress has that authority to do that under the Commerce Clause. They could pass a law which says you can't transact on these chains because it's unlawful to do so. But I think before we got something like that, we'd be much more likely to get a crypto reform bill. But I think a crypto reform bill is itself less likely than the United States dissolving at this point. So in terms of how you adjust, if you build an application which puts the entire application outside of the regulator's purview, so it's purely peer-to-peer, purely using First Amendment protected platforms which are aggregating data, and then the users are doing all of the transaction management themselves using open source code. I think that's probably going to last, 5-10 years at least of runway in terms of having an application which complies with the current legal regime.
And earlier you said that speech is different than conduct. What is sort of the distinction between the two?
Yeah, so expression and conduct, when you're engaged in purely expressive sharing of ideas, right? That is the core of what is protected by the First Amendment, right? If, however, right, so let's call it a DeFi app. Let's say I set up Marmot Swap tomorrow, and so Marmot Swap is the DeFi Marmot infrastructure where the world's largest Marmot coin exchange, which means that like maybe 2 Marmot coin are there at any one time. And so let's say I do that, I set up a UI, I do whatever, right? There's nothing expressive about allowing a user to hit a user interface and then facilitating the execution of a transaction, right? If you look at the historic definitions of what speech is, right, and what the freedom of speech entails, it does not entail sending transaction execution orders for regulated transactions, right? That's not it. Now, publishing the source code for the UI, that is speech, right? Or publishing the source code for the application, that is speech. But when you escalate, right, and you say, okay, not only am I going to release the code so that someone else can read it, understand it. The idea has been imparted and they can run that code themselves. What I'm actually doing is I'm saying, guess what? I've told you what this code is, told you what the application is. You can run it yourself, but why don't you pay me to run it for you, right? That's not expressive conduct. I haven't communicated anything there. And so as a consequence, that's not going to receive the protection of the First Amendment. So when we were looking at Tornado Cash, right, the phrase I always use when it comes to the publication of code and how that interfaces with the First Amendment is without more, right? That's the word that the phrase without more does a lot of work, right? So Alexei Pertsev, I think he was the guy who developed, was it Pertsev who did Tornado Cash? Well, let's say, for example, it was him. So he published his Tornado Cash. If he had just published an open source GitHub repo, right, saying, I'm just doing Tornado Cash, that would have been one thing, right? He hosted a UI, right? He facilitated liquidity pools to access it. He had a token that was bolted onto it, which was designed to incentivize people to use it. He allegedly coordinated, right, with other people in order to facilitate these transactions, and made agreements with people and provided technical support and all kinds of other things, right? So if you make those agreements, or you are willingly, knowingly, intentionally facilitating the use of this system in an unlawful fashion, that's really different than saying, hey, I'm publishing a method by which this can be done, right? And so the difference is, if you're merely publishing without more, right, then generally speaking, you can look to the First Amendment, and that should provide you with some protection. But if you go beyond that and you say, well, not only that, I'm going to charge fees to provide tech support to the North Koreans so that they can use it in order to launder their transactions, right? The without more there means literally without no more. You need to be very disciplined, stay within your lane, and just manage that repo.
You invoke the First Amendment, and I guess the question that I had been wondering if it spoke to was, is there any difference between like invoking the right of contract or the protection of individuals from the states regulating the right of contract? Is that something that you look to in your tool chest also in sort of defending crypto?
You don't really have a right to contract under the Constitution. There is a right to prevent the states from impairing the obligation of contracts, known as the Contracts Clause. But there's no right to contract, right? So that's a common, in the Constitution at least, there's a common law right to contract, right, that exists. But generally, when we talk about that right to contract is balanced against public policy considerations, where people say, well, you don't have a right to, for example, you don't have the right to engage in a contract for hire to commit a murder. So you can't contract to commit a crime. That kind of contract is void. There's certain types of consumer credit transactions which are void. There's such a thing as an unconscionable term, right? Contracts have certain terms which are implied to them, called the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. So you've got this whole list of things you can't do, but it's not really like you can go to a court and say, well, the SEC is impairing my right to contract because they're saying that these kinds of transactions are regulated. No, Congress said, listen, these kinds of transactions are regulated. You don't have the freedom to do, to engage in transactions that have been prohibited by Congress. So really, the First Amendment thing is very specific to solve. If you look at the precedents, Bernstein versus United States is the big one. If you look at those precedents, the courts talk about software being language, right? It's language which imparts ideas and communicates ideas which other people can read and understand. That in particular is so essential to the core right of the First Amendment, right? It is the right to receive and impart information. And our courts have said that's so important to a free society that even though, right, in the case of Bernstein, it was export controls, right, over cryptography. They said you can't publish source code because that's tantamount to exporting cryptography overseas. Court said, listen, doesn't give a shit. Congress shall make no law, abridging the freedom of speech. That means that the core right to receive and impart information, with some very, very limited exceptions, is not to be disturbed. And so what my theory, my operating theory, as an attorney active in this space, is that is the shield, right? That is the impervious shield under which crypto must shelter if it is going to survive, because that is the one thing the SEC cannot get through, the CFTC cannot get through, Congress itself cannot get through it, right? You would have to amend the Constitution. And there are ways we know that we can move our activities and our businesses so that everybody is engaged in First Amendment protected speech, and the ecosystem as a whole will have the utility that it has now. But it will have that utility delivered in such a way that nobody's actually breaking the law. Does that mean that we won't be able to make money the same way that we did on V1 of DeFi? Yeah, it means we're going to have to change our business models. Does it mean that it might be a little clunkier and it's not going to be as convenient as it was with MetaMask and hosted UIs? Yeah, and going through Infura for everything? Yeah, it's going to be a little less convenient. It's going to be a little clunkier. It's going to be a little slower, but it will be compliant, right? And it will be compliant because we've moved it under this impervious shield of the First Amendment.
Preston,
excellent explanations. Welcome to the stage, Bram, as well. It's nice to see you here, and we'll go to the hands shortly after we've maybe had a quick word from Bram. How are you, Bram? Or maybe
his mic worked out.
Maybe we'll come back to Bram. We've got a couple of hands up. Sage, you were up on the stage first, and I did see it as you had a sort of comment in the comments below. So yeah, go ahead, Sage.
Yeah, that was more of a comment other than a question. I did want to shout out Lucas, because Lucas has kind of opened my eyes to Chia, and he really champions Chia every chance he gets, and finds a way to relate a lot of our conversations to it. So I'm very happy to see this as a very open conversation for Chia, and I'm very enlightened about what's actually happening within this blockchain itself. I kind of had a follow-up question for Preston. I mean, you said the Democrats more so wouldn't be behind getting behind legislation for legislation and regulation for crypto. Yeah, I mean, you got to look at what happened with Sam with SBF. I mean, he gave a very big donation to the Democrats that went directly to the Democratic Party. So, I mean, don't you think by now they would have seen the benefits that this could have helped to illuminate them? Because, I mean, that went directly to them, regardless of everything that happened. So, I just heard you mention about Democrats not predominantly being behind it, and my broader question. When it comes down to regulation, is that do you think we would see any kind of change if the SEC just stopped involving themselves with tokens and blockchains and just got over and referred everything to the CFTC? I know there was a working piece of legislation in Congress to refer tokens and coins and whatever to the CFTC and list them as commodities, but I just wanted to see your thoughts on that and the broader aspect, and maybe if that will help produce a willful resolution, because I feel like with the SEC right now, we're kind of stuck in middle ground, and it's not providing anything satisfactory to just go around naming everything as a security. It's seeming to hurt blockchains more than help them, and it's seeming to drive industry out of the United States, as a lot of blockchains don't want to be labeled as security and have started to slow down their operations in the United States. And I feel like that's driving innovation and it's driving a lot of amazing things that could be here in the United States out of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the FIT 21 Act is what you're talking about, from the SEC getting boxed out of getting boxed out of crypto. I think the problem is, and what the legislation doesn't really address, is that it doesn't, and I actually have a paper coming out on this in the beginning of November in the International Journal of Blockchain Law. So essentially, the problem is that we have a definition of security which was designed and written in the 1930s, right, to deal with the Depression. And we have a technology which I think is going to be used for very different and very important things, none of which, right, were encompassed by the 1933 Securities Act. So FIT 21 makes it clear they tried to basically split crypto into two, the securities piece and the non-securities piece, and then make it really clear what the non-securities part can do. The problem is that the Securities Act uses an expansive definition of the term investment contract, and there's no really getting around that, which is that essentially we are regulating this thing which shouldn't really be regulated like an investment contract as an investment contract, because people are buying tokens, crypto tokens, as kind of a put option a call option on the future. So if you're buying a token, you're basically saying, listen, I think this decentralized distributed crypto system is going to amount to great and wonderful things. It's much like a stock in that regard. However, right, the function, crypto really hasn't met and found its product market fit. I think that when it does, it will probably be around authentication, because there's lots in crypto, right? Or contract execution, and introducing strong cryptography into everyday life and everyday transactions. We haven't really needed that so far, but I think what we're starting to see, both with the war in Israel and election propaganda and various other things, is that there's an increased need to be able to verify very quickly whether something is or isn't valid and has or hasn't been signed by a particular person. So there was an image yesterday out of Israel. There was an image of dead children that someone then AI modified. It was posted by the government. Someone then took it, ran it through Stable Diffusion or something like that, and then replaced the image of the children with the image of a Bernese mountain puppy, and said, no, see, the Israeli government was lying. It was actually a picture of a puppy. It wasn't a picture of a dead baby. So, and then they said, see, so the information ecosystem is so polluted because we don't have reliable sources of information or means of essentially authenticating information which is valid so that we can filter out that which is invalid. That's going to be a huge problem going forward, including in it's conceivable that someone, if they wanted to, based on just recording this call, they could probably record my voice and mimic it and then call one of my relatives and convincingly say, like, oh, hey, I'm being held hostage. Send $5,000 to this bank account, by 12 o'clock tomorrow, or I'm dead, right? That kind of thing. So the faking is getting so good that I think crypto will find its use case. And then we're going to understand really why this needs to be an open transactional system that anyone can access and not regulated like a security or an investment contract. So as to the Democrat thing, as a lifelong liberal Democrat, I know a lot of my friends who are also lifelong liberal Democrats want to send anyone who isn't like them off to labor camps in Siberia. So, I offer no opinion on that, but I just think that it's very unlikely that a right-coded, speaking as a lifelong liberal Democrat, a right-coded thing like crypto is going to make any penetration in the party, given how hostile they are to those ideas.
Yeah, and I think the foundation of technology like that is going to be a great leg up to see things like decentralized media and decentralized journalism be able to take a stand against misinformation once that technology, comes to the forefront, because combating misinformation, combating real-time, image manipulation, video data manipulation. We're not really looking at video manipulation as much currently because the technology isn't really there yet. But I think that could really provide a leg up to those industries to kind of have a stand against mainstream media and really hopefully clarify some of these things that are current problems that we're dealing with right now in today's ecosystem.
Awesome. Josh, let's go to the hands. How are you, Josh? And what you got to say?
Hey, thanks for having me up.
No worries.
Preston, good. Oh, good, great, thank you. Preston, I just want to ask you a question. Going back to Tornado Cash real quick. Just a question around how would you? So I want to use a concrete example. Today, our beloved Tibet Swap, our AMM. That is an open source project, of course. I can run it completely locally with my Chia blockchain if I want. I don't need to use Yak's website, tibetswap.io. But he does have a website that is centrally hosted that he runs that you can use. So my question is, that's kind of a weird gray area in that he's not, he doesn't have to be hosted, but it is. Also, the question is around the development fees, the development donation fee. So you don't have to pay a fee when you do the swap to the donation to the developers, but you can. That's another gray area. How would all of that resolve if it came down to court or to an issue like that? How would that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a facts and circumstances driven analysis. So, the answer will vary from project to project and circumstance to circumstance. I'm not in a position to tell you all the fine details about, Yak's project. I don't know what his future plans are or anything like that. So I don't want to comment about specifics, especially when it's specifics about, people who I actually really like in the ecosystem. But I think as a general rule, right, everything that I've said today should be regarded as advice of general applicability, right, which needs to really be in specific circumstances with specific projects with developers looking at their own personal long-term plans, you can sit down and tailor something so that exactly what you want to build has exactly the right legal framework around it. And it's going to vary from project to project and plan to plan and person to person. But yeah, no, I think Tibet Swap's great. I think Yak is great, but it wouldn't be appropriate to comment on
that's fair. So I maybe more more to my actually this goes back to your earlier stuff too around chaps. So my concept of chaps, which are just Chia apps that would run locally on your device, of course, and talk to the Chia blockchain. The idea is creating a framework for people who want to build those apps. So in that case, how would I, as the developer of that framework, could I ask for donations or somehow get a fee for every license sold or something, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, I think
but then if the app is sold, if the app itself is against some framework somewhere, does that get me in trouble, right? Like, that's the kind of question.
Yeah, so I think the answer there is really, if you look to the Apple App Store, that's the model. So there are ways you can monetize it. Advertising, downloads, in-app payments is what Apple has chosen to do. So I think if you're intermediating on transactions, I think just because of the way that our securities and commodities laws are drafted, that's something which is particularly dangerous. But notice Apple doesn't do that, right? They don't intermediate on securities transactions. It's in-app purchases of goods and services which wind up throwing the fee to them. So that's generally speaking pretty open field, pretty light touch regulation. But again, it'll really vary on the specifics of your business and the monetization model.
Cool. I'm sure I'll be talking to you more about that in the future. But thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to that. That'd be fun.
Fantastic. What amazing advice and insights into this.
It's not advice. It's not advice. It is guidance of a general nature. If you want some legal advice,
should I say insights into this world? That would be a better way of putting it.
Insight, exactly.
Insight, very good insight. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and we're then going to go across to Futuradora, who's going to come and talk to you about something she's been working on. So we've got a couple of hands, but I do want to get to Gene as well before that time. So let's just quickly go back to Sage, and then we'll talk to Blue, and we'll take it from there. So yeah, go on, Sage.
If it's all right, well, first of all, I want to thank Gene for being here, because that's a huge thing to have, direct transparency with people from the network and people from the greater, Web3 ecosystem to just be here, because that's a leg up on a lot of different, blockchains, because you don't really get that otherwise. I had a question directly for Gene, if it was all right. I wanted to ask, how do you measure the impact of Chia on the environment and society? What are some of the benefits or drawbacks of using something like this space as a scarce resource instead of the computational power or stake?
So, the obvious high-level track is what's kind of the annual electricity spend, because it's a proxy for overall impact. So you want to make sure that's, not zero, but that's not also like, we aren't even Dogecoin annually right now with GPUs. The other piece of this, though, is because of decentralization and because of the nature of storage, our goal is to make sure that, you can live in Northern Africa, and because you scavenged used computers, be a farmer. We always want to keep that a key piece. We certainly, we're going to have to go a little bit further. In other words, maybe your 15-year-old laptop won't work when it's 20. But the point is that there's this tremendous amount of storage and compute just gets thrown away or shredded and put in landfills. And so, one major thing is getting more of the hyperscalers to put their drives in the used market. And the CDI continues to do that. We are getting much closer to some of the biggest players stopping shredding drives. That will be a huge positive impact. But the one I care more about is getting the ability for people in the global south that aren't part of, the dollar, the pound, the yen, the ability to have financial freedom because they're willing to learn some Linux and find some used hardware. To me, that is just tremendously powerful. Not super easy to track, but I think that the node counts in various countries is one of the ways that I really do look at that. There are a bunch of farmer nodes in Colombia, right? That's important. So, I hope that answers your question. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, definitely. And if you, and I do appreciate that very much, because it's honestly enlightening to see, to see people that are in, otherwise not very accessible countries or, geographical locations be able to participate in stuff like this, because it kind of forelays the concept of Web3 and the concept of, unity and consensus for all into the hands of those people, which I'm very excited about. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask one more question. I've seen that within Chia being a layer 1, it essentially has components of the layer 0, 2, and 3. So with that, how do you balance the trade-offs between decentralization, security, and scalability in your network? And what are some of the inherent challenges or risks that you face in maintaining these properties?
So I want to finish a little bit of my answer from the previous one. I'll come back to this. One thing I'm really excited about is Circuit DAO. And the reason I'm excited is that over-collateralized stablecoins seem to work okay. And what's neat about Circuit DAO is it would let some of these people in these other countries get away from having like Chia volatility risk to some of the coins they farmed. It's a really kind of important extra step. So excited about that project. Now, we take a view that layer 1 needs to be as decentralized as possible. And that means that we look at the dilemma and we say, look, high TPS is not what's going to happen on layer 1. The whole entire goal of layer 2s and layer 3s is to trade off some decentralization for a little bit less security, while actually having full security underneath be what you unwind in when things go wrong. In other words, the layer 1 blockchain is the ultimate referee. And this works really well in things like advanced lightning, because you can build a scenario which lets multi-parties multi-pay, and if somebody cheats, there's a way over the next hour to unwind the cheat, punish the cheater, and get back to doing business. We feel like there's going to be a plethora of layer 2s. There's going to be state channels, there's going to be payment channels, there will be optimistic rollups make a ton of sense for data layer. That's one of the fastest things you can do to make data layer be very real time, because when you're talking about authenticity, order doesn't matter as much, right? All these sorts of things. So we think that like different applications and different user bases are fundamentally going to hang their layer 2s off the Chia blockchain for their consortia, market, you name it. And we'll have a hand in delivering some of that code, but at the same time, we're only running about 10, 11 TPS today. We got another double that before we hit the 50% limit, and the 50% limit can come off now. We're excited about the Pi 5. I think we're going to make that the kind of like de facto lowest end. So, your Pi 4s may sooner or later need to be farmers or harvesters and not full nodes. But again, we're always kind of keeping that cost of running a node and farming before the storage to be $100, $150 when you get the SSD. If you're buying new. I've got a bunch of old Mac Minis that I've put Linux on, and they're amazing node farmer harvesters.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Gene. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Gene. I think there's certainly a few new faces in the space below as well, and this is something we do every week. So feel free to follow the people up here on stage, because there's a lot of knowledge on this stage, and it's worth keeping a tab on these people. So I would definitely follow a few of these people, these faces, to keep up to date with things. Not necessarily all to do with Chia, but there's certainly a big Chia influence, with what we talk about here. So I guess sort of just to finish things up a little bit before we hit to Futuradora, is there a bit of a shout out to anybody down below if there's any questions in there? Let me just have a quick look at the questions down below. I did see one from Space Scan earlier, which was quite interesting. Let me just have a look. I think it was along the lines of Chia has 2 assets to manage. Which one would be prioritized? XCH, or the XCH price of the farmer, or the stock price, the investors?
I don't actually see it that way. So I don't see that being in any way contradictory. Okay. The whole goal is that a portion of the stockholder value comes from the pre-farm, and a portion of it comes from revenue. So ultimately, the stock should somewhat be ahead of coin price, but be relatively tied to it. I mean, those things are relatively unrelated, and I don't see those things being contradictory. If anything, I see that you have this ability to if coin price is too low, you can use equity to raise fiat to buy coins. If stock price is too low, you can use coin to raise equity to buy stock. It's a set of tools that allow us to kind of respond to market conditions long term.
Cool, excellent answer. Any other last sort of questions for Gene or Preston from anybody else up on the stage? Lucas, Daryl, Josh, Grant.
I mean, this is all really great information, and appreciate your time, Gene and Preston, and when you hopped on Digital Spaceport's channel, and we're just upfront with everything. It's been great. Obviously you have to dance around some things. You can't go too deep into stuff, but just that you faced the realities of things. You didn't just hide behind see a press release or this is all we have to say until further notice. Like, you've still been visible in the community and answering the difficult questions, even though they're a lot of the same from the same people, but just the transparency and really your attention to the community and everyone's thoughts and everything. It has been really great as we go through this kind of transition to kind of the 3.0 of Chia.
Thank you. Look, we want to be as transparent as we can. Obviously, we can't give everybody every single detail they want. Sometimes I'm like, you would need a proctology exam with that. But, we on the material items, we want to be right up front with folks and tell people what's going on.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I think it was a tough time. It was a tough sort of decisions to make, and I think the yourself and the team handled it as well as can be expected, and and I think being upfront and jumping on with a DSP straight away was a breath of fresh air in this sort of Web3 space that we're inhabiting right now. So appreciate your time. But let's jump across to Futuradora very quickly, because she's been missing in action for a little while, and I know she's probably got lots to say. So Futuradora, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. My brain has melted almost all the way. So thank you, everyone, for all this information. Gene, it's been a while. Thank you for all the time that you spent in the community. It's just very inspiring and admirable that you're here present. So thank you.
My pleasure. So
Futuradora, where have you been? You was around forever, and then you've disappeared for like a month or so. So what you been doing? Where you been?
I have been working on a huge project, I would say, since May, alongside some IRL stuff that most might have heard on non-recorded spaces, but I've been very busy launching this project and getting the right team together, and people in the community as well, and just really putting on this dream, planting a seed and letting all these amazing people around myself with different skill set to water the seed that I've been planting.
Awesome. And it's from what I see from your posts, is it Ghost Poeta? How would you say that?
Correct. It's a word I invented. Ghost Poetia.
Okay. Go on, yes. Then. What is it then? What's Ghost Pieta, and give us a bit of an insight.
I'm gonna try to pin the post. I don't the last time I did that, but I'll do that in a second. Well, Ghost Poetia is a project that I launched a while back. It's just me hosting a collaborative work between different creators, rooting from poetics in all forms and having a different creative output. I think many of us heard the /CLI poem that I've done in art and music space, and different creators and engineers. Cass is one of them. Chunk is one of them that got inspired to do a visual output for the poem. And I also worked with a DJ that uses technology while he's DJing to drop the first collection. And here we are dropping 2.0, which will be the third collection. And that's what the collection is about, and that's what this project is about. And this one is based off of a poem called Wild Woman.
Yeah. So the poem, what was that poem written by yourself or by somebody else? I'm not much of a poet fan.
Yes, that was written by Isadora, who I am on a daily when I'm not on Spaces.
Gotcha. Cool. And I hear your. I think the idea is to perform at the. Is it Met Amsterdam? MET Amsterdam. I guess that's the goal.
Yes, that's the end point of this project, or the starting point, and then we're rolling out to other festivals as well. Got invited to a festival next year. That's same as intersection between technology and creative. But specifically for this space, we're going to be doing a crowdfunding for the photo booth, and we're actually giving out tickets for the event, legendary tickets, which is, I think, about 600, I believe. Yeah, 600, and then some regular tickets as well for the event.
Cool. What is Met Amsterdam then? What is MET?
It is a festival, or it's also, I would say, a trade show. So it's a 3-day festival where tech and creative meets. So they have so the content is digital craft, AI, virtual worlds, and also gaming. So there'll be different speakers as well from different different blockchain, like Rug Radio, Thread Guy, so a lot of really big names as well. And I'll be speaking as well, aside from performing and having a booth with Cass, we're building a photo booth. So it's a huge project with a lot of different components. So mainly we're also shooting we shot a film in Terschelling here in the islands of Holland, and we have the performance in the photo booth. So those are the 3 key components. And the NFT drop today with Dudette and Cass, which I'm super honored.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw in your posts earlier, you've been working with a few people, Cass included. Who else has been involved with what you've been doing?
I just had an interview with Eric, a pre-recorded interview that will drop on Chia's YouTube channel. So we've been working closely with Chia Comms and marketing. So big shout outs to them to continuing to be engaged with the project. Hence all the different changes that has happened in the organization. So we're super blessed to still have that support and the engagement, and also Grant as well to support the process of the photo booth and being just hands-on, and also donating a setup for Evergreen for the crowdfunding.
That's amazing. Yeah, well played, Grant. Well played. I guess Cass then. Well, how are you, Cass? I've not spoken to you for a little while.
Hello.
Are you trying to watch the rugby at the same time?
Yes, I'm glad it's just half time, and we are close, but up front. So far so good.
Awesome. So basically, you're looking at taking along sort of an on-chain photo booth to the Met AMS, and I had the pleasure of experiencing your little basic setup you had at XCH London. I guess you're sort of looking at that and sort of upscaling that. Is that the idea?
That's exactly the idea. Like I had this idea like more than a year ago, and the first test, on chain, the first mint happened a year ago when I was, in my backyard shed, testing, and I was, the XCH London was just a different step up, to test on site, and now with the Futuradora Project, with the Meta's performance this year. That was the perfect setup to really try this setup, the real live photo booth with the kind of digital experience. It's mainly within Futuradora's experience at the Meta in order to engrave in the real proof of space and time with the physical print, meaning that you were there, the physical photo snapshot that you take. We used to do this in the shopping malls for your credit, your IDs and passports and stuff. So yeah, mixing everything with the Chia blockchain and the real life minting, this was the perfect setup within Futuradora's project. So yeah, I'm glad to be part of this and contribute to it and help prolong this journey within the Chia community, because I'd like to remember everyone, like a year ago, I was one of the people trying to convince her that, like, okay, you should come to Chia project and mint your project on Chia. You have the art, you have the skills, you're gonna learn, we can help you. And so I feel I have a duty to pursue this journey with her, and that's why I'm more than glad to collab with her on this project and help her for the crowdfunding period that starts right now.
Awesome. So the photo booth, I take it you've got like some sort of stand there at Futuradora that you'll be able to install this photo booth in. Is that sort of the idea?
Yes, I must say that the journey from where it was to what it is now, there's been many pivots. We were initially going for a lot of the art funds here in Holland because they support a lot of artists here. But since the dynamic of this project is so avant-garde and different components, not just performance, but there's a tech part of it, there's the art, the digital art, it was very difficult to, I would say, have these institutions that are very, I would say, old school to really think outside of the box. We've talked to a digital fund, but they weren't really understanding the project to its full entirety. But we've managed to have those relationships, so they're really keen on supporting the development of the photo booth for the next festival that will be part of. With that being said, the full budget for this project was around 70,000 euros with everything included, the dancers, the devs, the film, everything. And it came down to really not being able to secure funding, but the Amms itself really believed in the vision and the mission and also the message that we're bringing with the poem and all the different, I would say, babies that were birthed from this one poem, that they were super engaged to really facilitate the production of the photo booth. Initially, we wanted to build out a proper photo booth, which I could, move around to different exhibitions and whatnot. So they're helping with the production, of course, of the performance as well, and working together with us closely to make this dream come true. So we're doing it with zero fund at the moment, and all the different creators just believed in the story and everything. So everybody's working without pay, to be honest, which has been the most humbling part of the process.
So ultimately, are we looking for some funding here? Is that where we're heading?
That is the ultimate goal. We just dropped the NFT collection today with Dudet and Cass, and all of this funding is going to go towards the hardware and also all the creatives that were involved, and we're equally splitting the funds that we make from the NFT, and also the NFT that you get, that's what's being projected inside of the photo booth as well. I think Cass can take it away. This is not my skill set to talk about the crowdfunding. So Cass, please take it away.
quickly walk you through the crowdfunding part. You were asking earlier, where will be the photo booth? Futuradora has her performance on the main stage. She's basically been upgraded since last year because she performed already last year, but she's been asked. She's shy to say it, so I'm gonna do the pep talk here, and I'm gonna chill her quite hard. But yeah, she's been asked to do the main stage this year, so she made it to the main stage, and yeah, we will have the space during the 3 days of the event where we have the photo booth, and we'll be basically inviting people, extend the performance of Futuradora on the main stage, with the different elements of her performance of her poems, and projecting different backgrounds so people can take snapshots and have a physical print and the digital mint together at one time. The idea is really that through the crowdfunding to incentivize people to buy some of the art, because everything will go to the different artists, and there are quite a lot of prizes to incentivize all the people. And I will take a moment to thanks once again Chia Network for the support in comms, and of course Evergreen Miner, Grant is in the space here, is offered a starter kit to be drawn here. So basically every patron, everybody that buys the Wild Woman NFTs collection that has been released today, that is part of the Ghost Pressure. You can find it in the link pinned up there. Is eligible for a draw in 2 weeks' time. For people who are familiar with the Trunks draw that I've been running for the last year, it's the same style, probably fair. I will announce a block in advance before the draw around the 19th of October, which will be the end of the period. So any trade, until the 29th, of October is eligible for this draw. What you can win, there's 150 NFTs, up for sale for the crowdfund, and there is the startup kit, Dudette art also. She cannot make it basically because it's very late here in Indonesia. I guess we'll have another space next week after the the YouTube video drop from Chia Network together with Futuradora. So Dudette offered one-on-one dailies that she's been making for quite a while now. She also offered a 1-hour drawing session through Discord. So the winner will have a one-on-one 1 hour together with Dudette and basically be able to sketch anything, ask any questions from Dudette, the artist that we all love here in the Czech community. There will be also a one-on-one but Mathis Noise, which is one of the developers collaborating together with Futuradora for the Met Amsterdam performance. He's a very talented young French AI developer. I also will ship a physical print postcard format 10 by 15 centimeters of the post NFT I've been already teasing for quite a while, and I've released for this collection a physical print for each owner of the 50s gas NFTs post proof of space and time. There's also a one-on-one by Futuradora, and finally United Nodes of Chia NFT offered. So all of these together with the 3 tickets from the Metams, which is roughly €1,000 total. If you add the Evergreen miners, it's incentive for people to help have this performance not only happen this year, because we all committed to have it happen this year, but also be able to happen next year and the years afterwards, hopefully. Thank you for your time.
Fantastic. I think it's amazing, and I think it's highlighting what this technology can now do. I love the fact that you can go into a photo booth, have your photo taken, essentially directly minted to the blockchain is, it's really cool, very cool indeed. So I think and also the prizes that have been put up for sort of taking part as well is amazing. I think that's really cool as well. So So I was going to just say this: has the sort of Chia NFT sort of technology made life easier? And was AMS sort of, were they interested in that side of things, that side of the technology?
I must say, in the initial pitch meeting in May, I think it was back in May, when I was speaking to the coordinator of Amms, who's super into blockchain, he was shocked that I knew what Chia was. So I think he was just really excited, to really know that I was using it, just a poet and super passionate about the blockchain and just what it is and where it stems from. And I'm just super proud to represent, officially, unofficially be the poet of Chia. So they were super excited to have that as well. So that's something also that, go ahead, Cass.
For this purpose.
Exactly. So I think having the photo booth is just something that's never been done. So it's just, so many touch points of just innovation in itself as well. We're just all excited. And Cass, correct me if I'm wrong, the people that are buying the NFT in the next 24 hours are going to be in the patron leaf, which will also be in the photo booth, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Like the idea is to really reward all the patrons. Basically, if you get the NFT and assign it to your DID, we will be able to track most of you down, I guess, and be able to include you, as a special background that you can use within the photo booth. And having all your Twitter handles or DID handles on Mint Garden, whatever it is, being shown and show you, the community that you're going to be as patrons of this project.
And I think the example of what that design looks like, it's on the banner of Mint Garden right now.
It is indeed. I know. I just finished. I bought one. I'm trying to get moved to my DID. I was curious on the photo booth. Is that something like you're gonna open source kind of the code behind there, and once the NFTs are minted, is it private or public offer files, or how do people actually get their NFTs after they go in the photo booth?
That's a very good question. Like, you weren't at the XCH London, but at the XCH London, I brought a very raw prototype of the photo booth. I will tell you what is the photo booth made of. Well, what it was made of back then. Basically, a Raspberry Pi, a 4-inch, HDMI LCD screen, a webcam, and a QR code printer. That's all. And the script is a basic bash script afterwards. That's all you need to run a photo booth. That's the beauty of the Chia blockchain. That's the beauty of, having it run, a light wallet on the Raspberry Pi 4 connected to your phone, roaming from France to, from UK to France. It's beautiful. It was, well, the only issue I had, I think it was, I was trying to calculate the hash from the pin of the the NFT storage pin, and sometimes it wasn't working. But the only problem we encountered back then, I've tested some, I've run some of the tests. It works beautifully. You still have to wait a couple of minutes because the physical print is like instant, with a specific photo printer, postcard format, and so like 20 seconds to get the physical print. And once you've finished with your physical print, you can wait outside the photo booth a couple of minutes. So it's confirmed, on chain, the mint. And once the mint is confirmed on chain, you create a zero module of a file, because the idea is, you pay for your physical print, but you get the free NFT of a file. So we can promote Evergreen wallet or the soon-to-be out solution from Mint Garden as a, and Bubble Trouble as a co-op app. Basically, you're able to accept zero mojo offers, and it's a proof of attendance. That's the ultimate aim, to prove your attendance to that performance. You were there because you can now, with the latest version of Chia, you can even have, limited time restricted offers. So yeah, everything is run on a very few hardware, but in order to have a proper photo booth, you need to have ideally the latest version, the Raspberry Pi 5, a good webcam, a small photo printer, a QR code printer, a video projector, a case to transport all that, a USB hub. Well, it's very light hardware, but if you add this up, it's starting to look like a proper hardware. Hence the crowdfunding. For basically, and I should remind everything. The prototype is on my own money, and the idea is for the crowdfund to basically pay for an item for Futura, so I can build her own item, so she can take it anywhere. Whether she performs in a bar, she can take the photo booth, because she hasn't teased it, but I will. The Met Amps is not the only place that has been interested in photo booth in the Netherlands.
That's awesome. I think it's got so much potential. It really has, and I think the way that Chia offer files work just leans into it so well. So just everybody check out those pinned tweets at the top there, and show some support. Go grab an NFT or two, and let's all get behind the project and push it forward. So yeah, I appreciate your time coming in today, guys. It's it's great. It's great, and I think I'll certainly be supporting you guys. And if there's anything I can do, then just reach out, and I'll do whatever I can. But appreciate your time. I think what I'll do now is we'll just before we wrap it up, I'd just like to open it up to the floor, just for a general conversation. I know you've been hanging in there, Gene, listening to Futuradora, and I appreciate your time, and I know your time is valuable. So yeah, I think just some of these things that are coming out of the community must be good for you to see as well.
Absolutely. Watching the community build stuff is just amazing.
That's awesome. Any last bits from anybody on the stage here before we start wrapping things up?
Yes, if I may, because given the process of the draw, we can draw like pretty much everything in 2 weeks' time. But for the 3 tickets of the Maytams, ideally that would be very good to draw them like not now, but at least have people like or retweet. Everyone who has liked or retweeted the room tonight, it's the last chance now, will be entered in a Twitter picker, so we can draw 3 tickets. Whether you're in the US or in Europe, you can attend on 2. At least you will have time, because these are digital tickets. We will hand them over to you, to the winners. But at least you have a couple weeks time to trade them, sell them, or offer them to people close to Europe and Amsterdam, so they can attend the performance. So I encourage everyone to like and retweet the room, so we can hold the Twitter picker in later after the space. We don't have to rush, but you have time to like and retweet the room. So yeah, I encourage everyone to like and retweet the room. There's a few tickets. If I recall well, it's 600 euros for the Legend one, and a couple at 300 euros for the regular tickets to the performance, to the event.
Wow, fantastic! Yeah, let's keep it going for another half an hour then. Let's keep it going. I'm quite happy just to chat away for another half an hour or so. That's fine.
Monkey, I would just speak up for just a second about the project. When Futuradora first told me about this, obviously we drew a lot of inspiration from what Cass did with respect to making a phygital item on Chia. So I want to just keep calling out Cass as someone who we drew a lot of inspiration from. So when they said, hey, we want to do this photo booth thing, and we want to try to make a more seamless experience and try to make it easy for people that come to the photo booth and asked if the Evergreen mobile could be used. That was something that we were very supportive of and wanted to help facilitate. So I think it's exciting to see a project like this really get off the ground, and we're very excited to be a part of it, and also to help provide some amount of funding through providing one kit with respect to the crowd fund. So just kudos to the entire team, Futuradora, for bringing a lot of visibility to the Chia blockchain with the project she's doing, and just can't wait to see how it all turns out. And also the mileage that I know it's going to go a long way. The photo booth will probably make a long road in various different venues and places that it'll get taken.
Thank you, Bram.
I appreciate it, Grant. Like it wouldn't be possible without your work, and I just want to give a huge thank you for all the builders, all the devs that makes this possible and inspires me to keep going. And a big shout out to my mom, because she's in the audience listening, and Bram that left. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Mrs. Dora's in the house. Well, there you go. Mrs. Dora. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Dora, whoever you may be. Yeah, it would have been lovely to have Bram on stage. I think, maybe he's having a couple of problems. I would say technical problems, but I think Gene can attest to... one of the things I've heard Gene say a few times is that Bram doesn't particularly like computers. Is that correct?
That's totally correct. Bram is not a fan of computers.
We've got him on stage. How are you, Bram? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you. How are you, Bram?
I'm pretty good. I've Twitter Spaces has never really worked for me from desktop. It seems to be a technical problem on their end, so I had to reinstall Twitter on my phone to get on here. Yeah,
it's always been a problem. Yeah, I use a BlueStacks app, and that's hit and miss as well. So it's been a pleasure. What have you been working on then, Bram? Anything you can give us? Any alpha?
Well, I've been working on peer-to-peer gaming, and I've been checking in updates on that as they happen to a GitHub repo. That is working towards our our pre-alpha release, where basically the core logic thing that does it will be done, and then it will be relatively straightforward to get other people working on it as a project.
Yeah, I must say, I for one am really looking forward to playing around with that. That's going to be fantastic. Yeah, I don't know if you caught much of the conversation earlier about sort of decentralization and the importance of that, but I guess as one of the sort of the kings of decentralization, it'd be good to get your perspective on the way that things are looking right now, and Gene's touched on it as well.
Well, I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, I think we were talking earlier on about how a lot of blockchain technology is reliant on centralized entities now, and I guess sort of the legal side of that was sort of the topic of conversation. And with your experience with BitTorrent, etc., now with Chia, decentralization is something you're synonymous with, really. So yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, do you think that what you're creating is really going to make a difference in the way that the world is shaped in the future?
Well, gee, I don't know. The stuff that we're building really is decentralized. There's an awful lot of things that are built on top of Ethereum that are kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink decentralized, where really it's like, it's really an application that's just running in a ridiculous way that has this like very, very expensive hosting solution that it's using. And there are, developer keys on the back end that just can replace everything. So we're not doing that. The specific things that we're very focused on right now are this carbon credit tokenization stuff, which is very exciting. And then on top of that, on top of the carbon credit tokenization, there's all this gaming stuff that I'm doing. And both of these are legitimately decentralized and making really good use of that decentralization, that there's a meaningful difference in how the activity is being done. In the case of carbon credits, it leads to much more efficient and liquid markets. In the case of gaming, it kind of, it means that there's no casino taking a rake, which is really nice. But on top of that, it makes it fall under a very different regulatory regime because it's a game of skill being played directly against somebody else. I probably got into Chia a lot of the same ways that others did in the early days. Seeing your name and what Chia was trying to achieve, it wasn't about making money. It wasn't about EOS, raising billions of dollars and, doing everything for money. It was about tackling and making real change with decentralized technology. And, you obviously have the credibility with BitTorrent and, Bram, Gene with the companies he's shipped. But a lot of what Chia has been doing has been tackling real world problems with decentralized tech and then figuring out the money will come later, but let's solve real world problems first. And the money will come because we're, solving these problems. And just curious, you've been doing a lot of the work on the state channel gaming. Yeah. How big do you think that is going to be, and how much adoption do you see that hitting? How big is this for people that have never heard of it?
Well, that market is truly massive. The money gaming market is just enormous, and it's been held down over the last number of years because of regulatory challenges. That poker used to be much bigger. Was it 10 years ago or so? Poker was massive, and then it just got whomped. That most of the big sites, which were sponsoring most of the big events, it had their US customers locked out, and it's just hasn't recovered since. So I'm not worried about any kind of TAM or anything like that. That calculation is ridiculous. The questions really have to do with making a good user experience for the whole thing. When you first off need to have a good game. So I've just put a fair amount of time into actual game design on what I'm doing here. And then on top of having some good games, although what I'm doing will support any game, but I want to have some pretty good ones to start with. Any game within the genre, anyhow, which is very specific. But you need a good game, and then you need people to hear about it and be able to get access to the tokens to play with and to find other people to play with. And so all of those things have to be fleshed out for it to, work well.
Bram, I had a quick question for you on this regard. The Bitcoin VM folks were talking very much about on-chain poker, and I asked a couple of them if they were familiar with your work. I guess the reverse question for you, are you familiar with some of the work that's being done with respect to Bitcoin VM? Do you see that they're doing anything novel, or does it? I haven't
been following Bitcoin proposals all that closely. What kind of happened was a few years ago there was this research program that the Bitcoin wizards were doing. The Bitcoin core dev community had this general notion of where they were going with things. And then it just kind of stalled out. And basically since Taproot, it's been stagnating because they just can't deploy anything. And meanwhile, Chia's, chugged along, and we're now several generations ahead on pretty much the exact same research program. So it's a little silly in Bitcoin land right now for people to be talking about any sort of covenants that isn't basically just using Chialisp at this point.
This might be a question for Gene, but it's along the same lines of what you're building. Would these games be licensed out by Chia or sold to companies, or is this more building primitives that other
No,
people can use?
these are free games you can just play. This is what Preston was talking before about how, you know, if you release the software, you can just do anything, right? Like there's a very strong First Amendment protection on releasing software. So these are free open source games for people to play on top of an open source stack with any patents that we have being Apache licensed. Yeah, the idea is that you have this ecosystem that's built around it where, you know, there are a number of business models in gaming. Even for this type of gaming, you can set up a site where people find peers. You can run watchtowers. You can take money from fish. You always warn people not to play with more money than they can afford to lose. And you can train people to get better at it and charge for that as well. These are all, you know, well-established business models in the space. We don't want to run that whole thing. We want that going out. All I'm really trying to accomplish with this is, you know, build out the tech, because the tech is useful for lots of other stuff because it's state channel things. And then also, you know, the general plan is that people will acquire Chia in order to play the games. That's pretty much.
Yeah, makes sense. So with these first set of games, like the house has to win sometimes.
No, there is no
with
house.
These.
They're literally.
Oh, there's no house.
There is no house.
Well, then that answers my questions about if Chia was going to make any money off these first set of games.
No.
Well, the blockchain is the house.
Yeah. The blockchain charges transaction fees, which might be almost nothing if there's no traffic. That's pretty much the whole game.
Hey, Bram.
No, it makes sense. Strange Loop, I think you had your hand up next there.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Daryl. Hey, Bram, great to hear you. And hi, Gene. Hi, rest of the folks. You know, you mentioned state channels. So is the approach different from what, you know, this Lightning team was doing earlier? And then is there roll-ups involved? Or could you talk a little bit about...
So it's state channels the way Lightning does state channels, and there are no rollups because it's not like a side chain. Everyone's big on side chains now because, I don't know, it's an excuse to play with fancy machinery with no one getting mad at you for not actually deploying anything. But we're not doing that. We're doing really basic stuff first. So we're doing state channels very much like Lightning state channels. The details of how state channel coins work, like everything else, is just kind of cleaner in Chia because Chia is designed to do this kind of stuff. So the state channels themselves are actually a lot simpler, to the point where I haven't even written that stuff yet because it's so simple. I can just do it after I do this more core stuff.
There is an issue. Well, there were some known issues with some state channels where you could open n number of state channels, and that would cause some sort of. It's almost like DDoSing the network, almost similar to that. Like,
well, we're not. We're not working on building a state channel network here. Building state channel network is a huge pain in the ass. And the problems with it have nothing to do with the actual state channel underlying technology. They have to do with, you need to set up real world relationships between peers, and you need to have some kind of liquidity providing in the system in order for a state channel network to work. And that is a huge pain in the butt to get going. And especially when you have like pretty low transaction fees like there are in both Bitcoin and Chia right now. It's kind of a solution looking for a problem. So what we're doing is just doing gaming, where if you want to do a gaming session against somebody else, you set up a state channel just between the two of you at the beginning of a session. And then at the end of the session, you close it down, either because you close it down cleanly at the end, or if there's a problem, then it unrolls to chain and all currently pending hands get finished on chain. And this obviously is very, very advantage from a just practical deployment standpoint because you could just roll it out. You don't need all this crazy relationship building and everything to make something workable with it. And it gets real utility out of state channels because it means that you can have like a whole session with like tens of thousands of actual moves happening in the session over the course of a few hours. And get all those low latency benefits of having a state channel. But about what Bitcoin can do, Bitcoin is rather limited here. I mean, it has long block times, which is kind of annoying. But the bigger problem is that Bitcoin script just can't support real gaming. It just can't do it. So you can have your payment channel unroll to stuff on chain, but it's limited in terms of the complexity of the stuff that it's building that it can do, that it can unroll to. So you could have something like unroll to a game coin. The problem is you can't actually even have a game coin in Bitcoin just because Bitcoin script can't support that as it stands today.
Thanks, Bram.
Yeah, go ahead, Cass.
I've got a question for Bram, and a quick note, by the way, regarding the blockchain fees. I minted a few spend bundles today, 25 NFTs each spend bundle without any single fee, and transferred, bulk transferred NFTs, 25s in the spend bundle without any problem and without any fee today once again. So, as always, as usual, as I would say. The question was regarding the Chia TCG game, Chia trading card game. Will it be upgraded with everything that you're working on, or will it?
Yeah, the stuff that I'm doing right now is not related to NFTs. It's a different thing.
Okay, different, but that means the Chia TCG will be in that state for a while, and it will be another development branch for all you're working on.
We're not putting as much resources into NFTs right now as into this other stuff.
Okay. Thanks.
But yes, the point behind TCG is to be a a reference for other developers.
Yeah, understood. And by the way, it was fun. I had a lot of fun playing at the beginning, and I hadn't time to play in a while. But yeah,
yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm currently working on a Monkey Zoo version of a trading game, like a peer-to-peer trading game. So, payment channels, I guess, would be something that we would certainly utilize when you're playing a peer-to-peer game. You essentially don't want the other person to back out halfway through if they're losing. So, I guess would that sort of technology be able to be?
There's this very specific type of game that makes sense to play over payment channels, and part of the purpose of this suite of games that I'm building now is to show people what this kind of genre of game looks like. And it's a game that's played between exactly two people, and it has very few round trips. Like the actual number of turns in the game is quite small. And then it has some other weird limitations that are a little hard to summarize around what kinds of randomness it can use. It can use random numbers, but it's like the randomness that you get is, it usually can't be a permutation if it's secret. So like one of the games I'm building right now does use normal card shuffling and has like a familiar normal deck to it, that it's a game that you can actually play with like normal poker deck, which I've done many times. But the other games, like the poker game is kind of played with like this infinite deck where there's no card replacement value at all. Because it's really hard in poker to make it so that like I have my whole cards and you have your whole cards, and I don't know what your whole cards, except I know a little bit about them because they're not the same as my whole cards, and you know the same thing about my whole cards. Getting that to work is really, really hard. So I'm just tweaking the rules to not do that because it's not that central to the game. Yeah, and there's a few other changes I'm making to rules, like this might just be a good idea for poker in general, but like for space poker, at the start of each street, the first person to go is whoever was the aggressor on the previous street. So you like don't have a permanent notion of position in it. It's just like you alternate turns, really. That might just be a good idea in general, because like the ordering rules make a lot of sense in ring games and feel kind of weird in heads up. But the reason for doing that here is it reduces the number of turns, so that if you do have to unroll to the chain, it's not horrendously painful. Because like in poker, normally if like someone is, how does this go? If someone's like in position and then they call, then they actually go again at the beginning of the next street. So it's kind of like they go twice in a row. So you have like the round trip to the other person to do a reveal for like no particular reason. And it's better if it's just like the other person to go first on the next street. But yeah.
So when you say sort of an amount of turns,
yeah.
I mean, what sort of amount of turns are we looking at that would be able to handle?
Well, you should probably figure that, like, let's say if you're unrolling to chain, let's just assume that each time a player moves, that takes 10 minutes, right? That's a little bit on the pessimistic side, but probably reasonable. So, like, you kind of want it to be that it's not going to take, like, hours, right? So, so let's see. So 10, yeah. So let's say 6 turns total for a game, or 6 round trips for a game. So it's like 12 turns is probably about as much as as you really want to do. It gets really painful otherwise. And so regular poker falls into this as long as people don't raise too many times, which they generally don't. And the other games I'm doing have like really specifically like 5 turns or 6 turns, like an actually innumerable number of turns in a game.
So Bram, in this specific case, like I was wondering, can it run into like concurrency issue? Well, maybe not, right? Because in what I was trying to figure out is like, how is the order maintained? Like, you know, the not with the turns, but how do I phrase it? Maybe this is very specific to this implementation is specific to this game, right? Like I'm just trying to understand how there is there a trade-off, like you mentioned latency, like is there some sort of like the state is communicated through like message passing, or how is it like speeded up?
Game is designed, these games are designed so they can be played on chain. And
I see.
So you want it to be that the actual amount of information conveyed in a move is pretty small, right? Which is true of most games anyway. And you also want it to be that the amount of code necessary and the amount of computation necessary to validate a move is not that huge. And there's some amount of hinting that you can do, right? So like in poker, you have this thing where someone has like a hand. So they have like some number of cards, and then they make the best they can out of those cards. It's really clearly worth it to make it so that the onus is on the players to specify which cards that they're using in their hand. And then the thing that's validating on chain actually calculates what the hand value is if they select those cards, rather than the thing on chain actually going through all the hard work of figuring out what the best set of cards for them to pick out is.
Thanks, Bram.
Yeah, it's definitely it's fascinating. It's fascinating to look into, and you know, is this possible to do on other chains, or is this something that's pretty unique to the way that Chia works?
Well, there's always this thing where, like, in principle, everything Turing complete can do anything. It's way more painful on other chains than it is on Chia. Chia is kind of designed to do this kind of stuff from the ground up, so it's a lot better for it.
Cool. How many games are you working on, did you say?
My initial suite of games has 3 games in it. And one of them is a close relative of closed Chinese poker. We call it California poker. Another one is basically two-player Wordle. I'm calling that Crunk. And then the last one is a close relative of Hold'em and calling that Space Poker. So those are the games I'm initially supporting, just to show how to do this kind of stuff. Those do a pretty good job. In addition to being kind of fun games, they hit a lot of edge cases of implementation, was another thing I'm like very intentionally going for here.
I can't wait to get Crunk. Is there going to be any sort of release party announcement, or is it just going to be one day just Bram's games just show up on the internet?
No. Well, if you follow development, you'll see what's going on. So like I said, right now it isn't really even ready for other people within Chia to join in on. And I've been doing like a lot of pair programming with Art, getting to the point where it's actually like a workable thing. But most likely what we'll do is the general plan right now is we're going to have this pre-alpha release, which is not going to be ready for anyone else to work on, but we'll have like an actual like test. We'll have test code that's passing and stuff for it. So it will be something developers can look at. And then we're going to have an alpha release, which is going to be a thing that can work on chain, but is not something anyone would want to actually play. And so that's going to be supporting gameplay directly on chain. So no state channels yet, and only California poker is the plan for that. Then we're going to have a pre-beta, which is what you would normally call beta. We just want to call the thing that we launch initially a beta, because anything that involves real money, you want to be very tentative about making claims about what it's doing. But we're going to have our pre-beta, which is going to be, playable and workable, and we'll be playing over state channels, and might or might not support the other games. Not sure about the order of things. And then we'll have the beta, and the plan. And that's like the real release, is the beta release. And the plan for that is to have some gaming influencers be coordinated about doing that launch. And it won't be a launch on that day. Like the software technically will be out and ready, and anyone can just use it even before that day. But that's kind of the official unveiling of we are declaring it. like there's no release on that day. It's actually like the final release was like a week before. But that's the day when like we have a coordinated PR push, and influencers start talking, gaming influencers start talking about it on what they're doing. And we hope by then to have members of our community be ready as well with some of the ancillary applications, like finding peers in particular, and running services. You need like a bridging services so that peers can talk to each other. You don't really want them literally forming peer-to-peer connections, because that's A, annoying to do, and B, leads to like people doing, like old school IRC net splits, but now you're able to steal people's money with it. So you really don't want to give away your IP address here. And so it does like talk through a web page that's just like relaying messages between those two sides. So you want that set up. You want some kind of peer discovery set up. And we're hoping that there's some community projects that we can point to at the time, like multiple community projects we can point to at the time of launch, which are doing these things for people.
Well, I just want to jump in here, Bram, and if there's a in real life poker Texas Hold'em tournament, I'd want to apply for the dealer's position.
Yeah, we're not doing in-person stuff here. You could do actually an in-person tournament using this tech. Would be kind of interesting, where you have a bunch of people go to the same physical location, and you do want like some kind of protection against like outside assistance. So it would totally make sense to make it so people would actually bring their computers to an event or use computers at an event, where you're actually playing against somebody else who you're like sitting across from, but you're like looking at your you're like looking at your computer while you're playing against this person who's sitting across from you, but it's actually peer-to-peer. And the purpose of doing it in person is as a prevention against outside assistance, and also just part of like peer discovery for the event. Although what we're doing is more cash game than tournament.
Bram's going to be bringing back the LAN parties. You heard it here, folks. Everyone load up your desktops.
Well,
LAN parties are coming back.
So we, Chia, are not going to be organizing such things.
Yeah.
But it would be very cool if they start happening.
Before we go to Josh, I guess for Gene and Bram, what you're developing, Bram, is there, is there any utilization by Chia themselves, Chia Incorporated, for this sort of technology?
I'm sure we'll degen amongst ourselves.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the employees do here. I'm not very good at poker personally. I do enjoy gaming. I'm more a puzzle person than a gaming person. And a lot of my interest in gaming is more around like designing the game rather than getting great at the games. I'm an okay gamer. I am specifically not very good at poker. And so I kind of know what it takes to make a game that's interesting. And so I'm utilizing that with this suite of games that I'm making available, is like figuring out games that conform to the medium at hand and are still fun and interesting to play. And there are some Chia employees who are who were or are as a side hustle professional poker players, actually.
And board members. There's three things that came out of this process that are really important. Obviously, this is an interesting tool to get new eyeballs and new interest into Chia and use XCH as the kind of core casino chip. But there's really significant changes to Chialisp Dialect 23 that came through this and are kind of wrapping up. And so it's going to make Chialisp a lot easier high-level language for folks to develop in. And the tools around that came with. And then it's not full payment channels, but it's a step in that direction. And it really makes it easier when we're talking to certain enterprise customers about, future scalability. And, if their project becomes a roaring success, what will we do? You've got something to actually point at and demo and start to say, there's still challenges to be had, but we're not starting from scratch.
The modern Chialisp is way nicer to work in. And we're still adding little things that sometimes make a big difference to stuff. Like I added in the is there thing just the other day that I'm not using it because it wasn't there. But yeah, hoping that it's getting through the current set of features that Art hasn't finished integrating, and in some cases hasn't finished implementing, but there's some months left of work to really get that into a good state. And then there's also on top of that the other services of making it so that print and stack traces really work the way that I, for one, like them to. And once we have that done and it can hook into real debuggers and stuff, then it will be like a familiar environment that you can actually point people who are kind of noobs to, and they will have a reasonable experience, which is not the case today. We do not have anywhere near the kind of just basic tool support of a mature environment yet. But, it's been extremely little resources built into making the thing. So we're really, really far along for the amount of time and resources that have been put into it. And I'm hoping, sometime around 6 months from now, that'll really be a noob-friendly thing that someone can just, read through a tutorial, read through some example code, and sit down and start doing stuff. And, when there are issues, they can add diagnostic statements and get stack traces that really tell them what's going on. And they find the actual syntax kind of natural and not weird, and they can just sit and do stuff. Aside from the fact that they're programming in the coin set model, you will have to get used to that. But that's actually kind of interesting and very logical going on in it.
Bram, what are your thoughts around if, say, there is a data flow kind of, data flow programming languages, like they had this interface where, you could actually, design for data flow, like how, it's basically, I think if you see some of the languages out there, like for Chialisp, I mean, do you think that would really make things easy?
The way Chialisp works is very, very centered around the coin set model, around this idea that there are no side effects except coins getting spent and others getting made, and all the state is kind of held within coins. And that's a very, very different paradigm than other things. And the way it's all set up is very, very logical given that way of thinking about things and that way of operation. So I don't think other programming languages are going to be very applicable here.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, go on, Josh. You got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Bram, back to gaming just quickly. Singleton spend aggregation. Couldn't you use that to increase the number of moves between players in between blocks, possibly?
Well, the problem with having a lot of moves in a game is it just takes forever to finish a hand when there's a problem. The way gaming over a state channel works is that usually it all just ends cleanly at the end. But in the event of there being a problem, you play things out like on chain, and you really want to minimize the number of moves there so that isn't too painful when it does happen. And then, there's all these layers of aiming for scaling. So the actual moves of the game as they're played out, all the moves are accepted optimistically as they go forward. And then only in the event of someone attempting to cheat are the actual rules of the game invoked. And in that case, someone says, hey, the other person cheated, provides evidence for it, and then the coin slashes the other person. But an interesting thing about this is there aren't really any capabilities necessary here. You just need covenants. Like singletons aren't really necessary because the point of a singleton is you know what you're talking to. And here you have this like fairly ephemeral gaming session. It's not like something else needs to know that it's talking to that gaming session or anything like that. You just want to finish out your gaming session. So you want covenants, which are these restrictions going forward in time. You don't really need any capabilities, which are these things that point back to show that you came from something in the past.
Interesting. So because in my mind, I'm thinking like, for example, two players, we're sharing this singleton that's on chain. I can update it, and then you can see my update in the mempool, so then you can update it.
It's not a singleton, it's a state channel. So it's actually stupider than a singleton. It can actually be a regular vanilla coin. It probably won't be in our initial rollout just because that's a little bit more development work and I'm going to be cutting corners here. But yeah, it's actually just a coin. It's just a normal coin. And it doesn't need like any capabilities like a singleton has. And it can just be much simpler and dumber.
Well, I guess that's my question is, would building further on top of that and making it a singleton, giving it a little bit more complexity or some intelligence, so to speak, and would then singleton spend aggregation work in that you and I can both see what's happening in the mempool and kind of respond to each other's much quicker than, a single block?
No. I mean, you are already, well, you don't really want to, the problem is not the ability for it to go fast. Like by the time you're playing on chain, your counterparty has done something bad, right? Like the way to avoid having to wait for stuff on chain is you just keep it in the state channel and then you're playing with extremely low latency and kind of real time. Once it's unrolling on chain and you're actually playing on chain, this has happened because you should assume from a development standpoint that this is happening because your counterparty is basically DOSing you or has just become non-functional for some reason. And so there you're not really optimizing for like how quickly can it work when players are trying to cooperate. You're kind of assuming this is adversarial at this point.
I see. So in the game design here, the chain is more, like you said before, almost like the referee, so to speak. You normally
it's actually the script that actually does the gameplay is called the referee. It is called the referee. Actually.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So the block, if you have to go to the blockchain, then something unnatural in the game has happened, so to speak, or not in the normal course of events. We're now to the referee.
Yeah, usually, hopefully, it's that one of the two sides just like lost their net connection. But yeah.
How does it take care of the order of the states? Like, how does it maintain that, or like?
So the way state channels work in general is we have this collaborative thing where there's the actual state channel coin is a 2 of 2 spend that we have to both agree to what it's getting spent to in order to spend it on chain. And so if everything works out cleanly at the end of a session, then we just spend it once and we're done, right? All the intervening states, what happens is all states that it can go to have a sequence number. And so I will like sign a sequence number and send it to you, and then you sign a sequence number, send it to me, and so on. We just kind of bounce back and forth, like incrementing by one each time. So the idea is, like when I make a virtual move, I just say, okay, well, here's the virtual move that I make, and here is me signing off for you the new sequence number, the higher sequence number than the last one that you sent me. And so the way this works is there's just a tiny little covenant thing that happens here, which is when the state channel coin gets spent on chain, it goes into this state where it's going to exit in one of two ways. Either it's going to time out, in which case it creates exactly the coins that it said, or it's going to, or there's going to be a larger sequence number that gets presented that has the opposite parity of the one that created it in the first place, right? So I'm sending you all odd number sequence IDs, and you're sending me all even number sequence IDs. So the idea is, if I say, oh, well, here is some state that I want that's like, state, 30 or something, that I just take the thing that was half signed that you sent me and I finish signing it. And now I'm like, hey, look, here we have state 30. You can then take, you can say, no, that's an old out of date state. Here's state 35 that you sent me, and that can be applied immediately. But obviously you can't, it would be silly to make it so that an even state number could override that old one, because that's in the same direction. You already had your shot at making that larger sequence number. So that's the way it works, is that you, both sides have the ability to make it so that as recently as of a mutually agreed upon state as can be generated is done, and that actually goes on chain. The exception being that it could be that the very last state update is not reflected in the one that's on chain. But generally speaking, whenever you do something, you are doing a move that could be done on chain, or is directly beneficial to the other side or neutral. So if the state that goes on chain is like one less than the final one, because like say you just started a hand, or because there's just some move that's not reflected in the one that's on chain, then either that hand just never started, or the other side can actually just make the move that they attempted to make over the state channel while it was still a state channel and the coins were virtual and not real.
Got it. So the counter serves as almost like a logical clock, right?
Yeah.
Almost like maintaining the causality of like all different events.
Yeah. This is fairly normal state channel stuff, it's called payment channel stuff in Lightning because it does less, but it's pretty much exactly the same thing. I'm just doing it a little bit differently because I'm doing this even odd thing, which I think makes it a lot simpler and cleaner. But yeah, this is nothing like super innovative here. This is pretty normal state channel stuff.
Thanks.
This is all super exciting stuff. I have a completely random question because, your time's always very limited with us, Bram, and we always appreciate it. Have you ever looked at your Chia wallet, the address that you published a few months back that we've all been sending funny NFTs and random cat tokens to?
Yeah, I did see that there's a bunch of NFTs in it. I haven't opened it recently, so I haven't really been looking.
Yeah, I bumped it here just a few weeks ago, but yeah, every now and then, you receive cat tokens too for some of these NFTs. But yeah, I remember it was a few months ago that you posted it. But yeah, people still send random NFTs and just fun things there. It's nothing crazy, but yeah, people do it for the laughs.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I guess that question could go to Gene as well. Gene's got quite the did these days.
Yeah, I keep an eye on it.
This is kind of random thought that I just had. I used to work for Ritchie Brothers. It's a huge, well-known company out in, they're based out in US, but they do auctioneer, and they also have online auction. Have you guys thought about approaching like auction houses?
I don't know if dirt movers are yet into using online auctions, but maybe. For those who don't know about Ritchie Brothers, they do all sorts of heavy equipment and trucks, and that's kind of
Yeah,
their
they
specialty.
they have online auctioning. That's when I started to work with them to head the inside sales team for the online auction.
There are definitely some things we want to do around auctions that aren't there yet, but it's just not yet been a priority. And those are just some primitives to be able to like do those auctions on chain, right?
Boy, never in my days of crypto did I think I'd be, talking about Ritchie Brothers auctioneers. But yeah, for those that don't know, they don't just sell like big equipment. They sell like the biggest equipment, your dump trucks, excavators, the biggest of the big equipment through auctions for like construction companies. But yeah, that would be cool if they would start to modernize their tech. But yeah, like Gene said, they're very archaic and they do in-person auctions. And even for proxy bids, it's not a company that's historically, going through a digital transformation.
If you ever wanted to buy a clapped out bulldozer, that's your place.
Oh, sorry, I was just answering a question. Yeah, no, what a fantastic space has been today. I really enjoyed talking with everyone. Appreciate everybody coming in and just getting involved, especially on a Sunday afternoon. Everyone's time is valuable, so I do really appreciate that. Is there?
Dude, it's very bullish, and honestly, dude, I consider myself more on the side of chain agnosticism, but I think I'm slowly becoming a Chia Max, dude. It's actually very surprising, but hearing Lucas first talk about it in a couple spaces, and now getting to see the full circle through, it's honestly just amazing, man. It's so humbling to hear about stuff like this going on right now, because I feel like it's things like Chia that are gonna not only help usher back in the bull market, but help to create a use case for adoption for new users and for new people to help explore all the technology that we have available here.
No, thanks for the kind words, Sage. And like I always say too, I do believe we have the best community in crypto. Everyone's always helping each other. Like you look at Cass helping Futuradora. I've helped her with stuff. Jump on with Tim, and his project has helped other projects, and it's really a collaborative space, and no one's out there trying to put others down or pull the rug from someone else. We're all trying to help build stuff, and we're really treating it like a community across all the projects, and the company treats it the same too. Even the people that had to be laid off, they're still active members in the community, and sometimes there is that fine line between business and friends, but every one of the people that I had worked with directly, I reached out to them with the layoffs, and they were still positive about things, and it is a community effort over here too. But great to hear that you're seeing the green pill there, Sage.
Yeah, Mice Media, you've jumped up on the stage. I know Lucas has been talking with yourself as well. How are you, buddy?
Doing great. I really appreciate you having me up. And I don't think I have been nervous to be on a space until now in the last 6 months, because I'm a huge admirer of Bram. And I just wanted to thank him. I think he's one of the most important digital freedom fighters maybe ever. So I don't want to take much time, but I did want to say thank you. And it's an honor to be up here with you guys. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, appreciate you coming up as well. Have you got any specific questions? I know Lucas has been talking with you and with Sage, and I think what Sage was sort of talking about there is, Chia Incorporated, the company. You've probably been told, I'm sure, by Lucas, but some of the stuff they're working on with the World Bank and enterprise level stuff is pretty incredible. And us down here sort of utilizing this technology, and we've been lucky enough to follow this journey and know what's happening and what's coming. And I can talk from the NFT point of view, and I can say that the NFT technology is by far it's so far advanced compared to what everybody is using right now. And some of the stuff we're developing sort of behind the scenes and is just next level stuff. And and that is generally down to you know, what Bram and Gene have created. So you know, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, Gene, you could probably talk more about you know, the difference between Chia Incorporated and Chia the blockchain, and what Chia the company themselves are doing, you know, on this sort of global stage is pretty impressive.
Well, I do have a question. I think you had said if you don't mind, I'm super interested in the data layer that you guys offer. On the NFT side, I mean, we are an NFT brand, and you know, that's, I think what you guys are doing is great. But on the data layer side, I'm kind of blown away. And I guess my question is it built in a way that, you know, brands are able to build on top of that data layer and use it as an alternative to centralized storage? Because if so, I think that's insanely powerful. But again, I've asked Lucas a bunch, and I know he's answered. But curious from your perspective, is that how it works?
So you should think about data layer as being storage independent. So the idea is that you can very easily point at multiple different types of storage, and then you can make it so that, you know, your NFTs would be able to be found at different places, so that you're not relying on any one storage provider, you're not relying on any one storage service. So, you know, in a lot of the enterprise cases, it's really simple for an enterprise or coalition of enterprises to agree, like, hey, we're all going to use S3 or something, right? Because it's just something they're very used to. But that's just simply for storing the data objects, the actual updates to the database. You know, everything else coordinated and managed and moved on chain. So you know, you can decide for yourself what you want to use as the actual storage delivery layer.
Well, in our the reason I'm interested, aside from the NFT stuff, is, again, going back to that centralized storage. When it comes to media, that's a really important piece, right? Because if you're reliant on anybody else's storage infrastructure, then you're not really kind of in charge of your own destiny, right? So for us, aside from the media, or aside from the NFT portion, on the media side, is that something? Could a media network or a media platform build on that data layer?
Well, so you know, if you allow it, anybody can subscribe to your data layer. So when you make an update or a change, they basically automatically mirror it. So what you're doing is kind of creating auto mirroring for any of the assets that are updated in that data set. So, you know, one of the things you can do is, like, you could have your own storage off, you know, a horrible connection. It's not exactly secure, or pardon me, not exactly high availability, but it's mirrored so many other places that, you know, you're kind of the place of last resort to pick it up.
Maybe to throw in some background too, I talk in spaces, and Bryn here with Mice Media, and I once described myself as a decentralization maxi. He said I'm a decentralization maxi, and I had never even asked what their NFT project was. I just like to run my mouth about politics. So we got to talking on the backside, and he loved everything about Chia. Or I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Bryn, but I think many of the things that you seek are here.
Yeah, and I would say from an NFT point of view, one of the key factors is that you know, each individual NFT is a coin, so therefore each individual NFT is its own smart contract, and you can then start really looking properly at how you integrate Web3 gaming with digital assets using this technology, and the way that you can do that as well with data layer essentially being a place of truth for what gaming assets are doing what is a really powerful tool as well. Yeah, if that makes any sense.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. That clears up a lot. And again, thanks for having me up. I really do appreciate it.
No problem at all. I think Bram's gone now. Is he gone? Have we lost him?
Yeah, he had to step away.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, well, I think I'm going to wrap things up. So I'm just going to throw it around the room very quickly. And I really do appreciate your time, Gene, for coming on. And you know, it's been 3 hours. Usually we only sort of do around about 2 hours, but you know, I couldn't be the first person to kick Bram off a stage in a Chia space. That didn't seem right to me. But yeah, no, appreciate your time, Gene, and everybody else that's come into the room today to speak. And what I will do is the space is recorded, so I'll try and get this out on YouTube as well, because I know a few people in the Chia Discord have been asking for it and maybe don't necessarily come onto Twitter. So give me a few days to play around with that. Maybe Yoke can come up with something. He came up with a good graphic for stuff earlier on. So let me just fire it around the room quickly. Any sort of last questions about the space, or any comments?
It was a great space, Tim, and thank you, Gene, for coming so much. That was awesome.
Pleasure. Thank you all for coming.
I'll say from the farming side, there's been a lot of FUD around Chia. Like, I'm still expanding, growing. I know there's other people that are too. And, I very much, believe in what I said earlier, that, Bram and Chia are out to change things. And, being a farmer, you can be part of that. And, I'm still very bullish on Chia, not from a price, but from a technical standpoint and everything they're trying to achieve. And my farm's humming along, and I know plenty of other farms that are doing the same. And it's still fun to be a part of, and the community is just what sets us apart too.
Still plotting, still farming, still building. Thank you all.
Yeah, that's the way. That's the way. And I think more and more eyes are appearing on what's happening over here, and we've been very lucky for the last year or so to be kind of hidden away from mainstream stuff, and that's that's inevitably going to come at some point. So again, we are very lucky to have this sort of quite small community where people are developing and lending hands all over the place. So and that comes right down from the very top. So appreciate everybody coming along today. We'll do this again this time next week. I can't promise that we'll have Bram and Gene on the stage, but you'll certainly have me, possibly Lucas and Daryl, and I'm sure a few others. But again, before we go, make sure that you have a look at Futuradora's stuff and the pinned tweets at the top, and follow everybody on the stage here before you go. Thanks very much for everybody coming along today. Really appreciate your time, giving up the time, and that's a very valuable thing. So thanks ever so much, everybody. Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Sage. Thanks, Futuradora, Cass, Grant, Mice Media, and all the other guys that have been in today. And I'll speak to you next week.